Welcome to Game of Thrones, Fanfiction. Today's adventure, what if Jon Arryn lived and exposed Cersei's incest to Robert? If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1, The seed is strong. The fever had broken in the dark hours before dawn, and Jon Arryn could feel the difference in his bones. Sweat had soaked through 3 changes of linen since the chills began, but the heat was gone now, leaving only the trembling of an old man whose body had been stretched too thin. He lay still in the great bed of the Tower of the Hand and watched the first grey light find its way through the leaded window. Somewhere beyond the city walls a cock was crowing. Beyond his door, the boots of a Stark guardsman creaked on the boards. The world had not stopped because he was dying. He did not feel as though he was dying. That was the curious thing. He had felt himself going for 2 nights together. The first night, when his bowels had turned to water and his vision had swum sideways like a school of fish, he had been certain. The second, when his lips had numbed and his tongue had thickened in his mouth, he had spoken with the stranger as old men sometimes do, and made his peace, and forgiven himself the few sins that an honest life had not already absolved. But this morning he was thinking of pears. Of all things, pears, the small green ones from the Eyrie, sweet and unblemished. He could imagine biting into one. That was not the appetite of a dying man. The door whispered open. Maester Coleman entered, narrow and stooped as a heron, with a fresh ewer of water on a tray and a face that had been schooled to neutrality and was failing the lesson. "My lord. You are awake." "Awake," Jon Arryn said. His voice scraped against the dry inside of his throat. "And hungry." That stopped the maester in his tracks. Coleman set the ewer down so carefully it might have been a sleeping child. "Hungry, my lord. Bread, if there is any. And water." He paused. "Not wine." "No, my lord. Not wine." The chain of office at Coleman's throat clinked as he bent over the bed. He laid 2 fingers along Jon Arryn's jaw, then his wrist, then pressed his palm flat against his forehead. The pinch of his brow eased by a hair. "The fever has gone. Truly gone. I would have wagered a horse you would not see the dawn." "Then it is well that I do not own a horse you have not already had from me," Jon Arryn said. He surprised himself by smiling. The muscles of his face hurt with disuse. "Bring the bread, Coleman. And sit with me." The maester hesitated, then bowed and withdrew. Through the open door Jon Arryn could see his lady wife in the antechamber, already dressed though the light was thin, pacing. Lisa had paced for 2 days. There was a particular quality to the way she moved when she was frightened, a tucking in of the elbows, a clutching at her own forearms as though to keep her arms from flying off her body. He had not seen her so frightened since they buried his last son. "Lisa," he called. She came at once. She had been pretty as a girl, freckled and sweet-faced, and there were still shapes of that girl in her if you knew where to look, but worry had widened her eyes and the lines at her mouth had been carved deep by habit. "My love. You are better." The maester said. He said, "I am better, yes." He took her hand. She had not expected him to take her hand. He felt the small shock of it run up her arm. "Sit, Lisa. There is something I must ask you." "Anything." "The wine that Pycelle sent." The shock traveled deeper into her. He felt her fingers go briefly slack and then grip too hard. "Wine, my lord. The flagon that came from the Grand Maester's chambers 2 nights past. With the message that it would help me sleep. I do not know which, you poured it for me. With your own hand. Do you not remember?" She remembered. He saw her remember. The pupils of her eyes went small and her tongue darted out to wet her lips and a flush climbed her throat in a way he had seen on guilty children in confessing nights and once, long ago, on an Arryn cousin who had cheated at Cyvasse. Lisa was no good at lying. Not about anything she cared about, and Lisa cared about him. Or thought she did. Or remembered caring about him. He had stopped being able to tell. Lisa, he said again, gently. I do not blame you, child. Blame me, her voice broke. Blame me for what? He had not meant to say it. He had meant to wait until he was strong enough to stand and to call witnesses and to do the thing properly. But the moment had come of its own accord, and he was Jon Arryn, who had taught 2 men to be wardens in a realm that had forgotten how, and he had never been a coward in his life. For pouring me poison. She did not cry out. She did not shout denials. She made instead a small high sound like a hare in a snare, and snatched her hand back from his and pressed it over her mouth as though to keep some other sound from escaping. Then, very fast, the Lisa he had not married, the desperate, unraveling girl who had been hiding under the lady, came scrabbling out, eyes brimming. He said you would suffer no pain. He said it would be like sleeping. Who said? Peter. Of course. He had known it would be Peter before he had asked. There was no other man in 7 kingdoms whose name would put that particular tremor under her tongue. Sweet wife, he said. He did not feel sweet. He felt as though something had cracked inside the ribcage of his world and the pieces were grinding against each other. Tell me everything. She told him. It came out in a rush, half words and half weeping, the letter from Peter, the small enameled vial with the Strangler crystals, the promise that they would be together in the Vale once Jon was buried, the promise that her son would have his proper name at last. Sweet Robin. Peter's son, she said, mine and Peter's, not yours, never yours, you should have known. She said it with a defiance that shook her. He had not known. He had not let himself know. He told me you had grown suspicious, she said. He told me you would destroy us all. The Lannisters would see to it. He said the Queen had spies in our walls. The Queen has spies in everyone's walls. He said you had a book. A book of bloodlines. I had 2 books, Jon Arryn said. 3, in truth. Pycelle did not get them all back from me. I am thorough, Lisa. I have always been thorough. She was crying in earnest now. Maester Coleman had appeared in the doorway with a tray of bread and a cup of clear water and was politely pretending not to hear. Jon Arryn watched his wife unravel and felt only an enormous tiredness, far older than his fever, far older than this day. He had loved her, in the small and dutiful way an old man loves a young wife who has given him sons. He had not made her happy. That, he could see now, had been the root of it. Lisa, he said. Look at me. She lifted her face. Tear streaks shone in the dawn light. You will not be punished. Do you hear me? You will go to your sister at Riverrun. You will take the boy. I will write the letter myself. No man living will lay a hand on you for what was done in this room, because I am living, and the choice is mine. He let that settle. But you will tell me everything Peter ever wrote you, and you will tell me everything Pycelle has put his name to, and you will tell me what the Queen knows. The Queen. She blinked. What does the Queen, you have not been told? He almost laughed. The poor child. The poor stupid loving cruel poor child. Peter did not even tell you what you were dying to keep secret. Tell me, she whispered. He drew a breath that did not catch on anything any longer, and felt for the first time in 3 days the easy seat of his own lungs. Later. First, the bread. Then the maester. Then a few small ravens. Maester Coleman took 2 strides into the chamber, set down the tray, and looked from one to the other of them with the bewildered expression of a man who has walked into a private war and did not bring his banner. Jon Arryn waved him forward. Coleman. Sit. Listen well. My lord. 2 nights ago you brought me a draft from Pycelle. I refused it. You did, my lord. Last night I drank wine. My lady wife poured it from a flagon also sent from Pycelle. He did not look at Lisa. He kept his eyes on the maester. Tell me what was in it. Coleman's narrow throat worked. He had been Jon Arryn's man at the Eyrie before Jon Arryn was Hand. He had come south because he had not wanted to be parted from his lord. He was loyal in that mostly silent way of men who have learned the world rewards loud loyalty with knives. He said, "I had thought, my lord. I had thought certain things. I have not been certain. Be certain now." There were crystals at the bottom of the cup. He looked at his hands. "When I came up before dawn to find you dead, my lord, you were not dead. I poured the lees into a basin to throw away. They had not melted as wine lees. They were small purple things. Like beetles. I have read of the Strangler. I did not believe." He glanced at Lisa and away. "I did not wish to believe. You did not wish to accuse the lady you serve. My lord. You are a good man, Coleman. Take the lees. Pour them into glass. Do not let them out of your hand until I tell you what to do with them. Speak of this to no one. Not to Pycelle. Not to anyone in white. Only to me. Yes, my lord. Now. The bread." He ate as a man eats who has not eaten. Lisa wept in the corner without sound, and Maester Coleman withdrew to do his master's bidding, and the rising sun warmed the chamber, and Jon Arryn felt the long mistrusted strength of his own body beginning to gather under him again, and he thought of three things at once, as one does when one has been spared. He thought of Peter Baelish, who had taken his small and clever talents up out of the muds of the fingers and into the keep at the Eyrie, whom Jon Arryn had patronized as one patronizes a stray clever boy. He thought of Peter in the Hand's small council, smiling at his coin counting. He thought of Peter now, in some shadowed corridor, expecting a letter from a poor distraught widow and getting instead a summons. He thought of Pycelle, with his too long beard and his too trembling voice and his too old mind, who had not been the Grand Maester any of these years so much as he had been a Lannister in a chain. Pycelle could be dealt with. Pycelle was the easy part. And he thought of Robert. The third thought was the heaviest. Robert was not the easy part. Robert was the nearest thing he had to a son and the worst king in 300 years and the man whose right hand had to hold a hammer when the news came. Jon Arryn had been chasing the answer to one question for half a year now, ever since the night the Queen's ward Lancel had confessed too easily that he had been the one to bring the king's wineskins onto the boar hunt. He had been chasing his own suspicion through the Red Keep like a hound after a rabbit, and what he had cornered was not a rabbit at all. He had checked the bastards first. Robert had bastards everywhere. Robert spread bastards as carelessly as a drunk salts food. They lived in fishmongers' houses and innkeepers' cellars and orphans' homes. They were of every shape and color. But they were always coal-black of hair. Black, like Robert, like Robert's brothers, like Robert's father, like every Baratheon since the bull broke the Stormlands to its will. Black, even when their mothers had been gold or red or brown. The seed is strong, the maesters had written, and the seed had never been stronger than in the line of the Lord of Storm's End. And Joffrey was as gold as a coin from his crown to the soles of his royal feet. Myrcella was as gold. Tommen was as gold. 3 children of the king, 3 children of the queen, no black hair among them. No grey eye. No straight Baratheon nose. 3 Lannister children calling Robert Baratheon father. He had stopped letting himself say the rest in his head, because the rest was treason of an order he had not committed and was not prepared to accept. He had told himself, instead, perhaps the seed lies down in the queen. Perhaps the maesters were wrong. Perhaps the histories had simply not noticed the few light-haired exceptions. Perhaps. Perhaps. The Strangler had ended the perhaps. He thought, watching the sun crawl up the window, of all the men one might consider sending such a poison. There were not many. Pycelle had access to it, the Citadel had access. The faceless men charged dragons no Westerosi lord had to spare. Peter Baelish had no maesters of his own that anyone knew of. Peter Baelish had Lisa. The conclusion forming itself was not a conclusion he wanted. Peter had told Lisa to do this. Lisa was Peter's piece, but Lisa would not have moved unprompted, and Peter was no king's man, and Peter had no quarrel with Jon Arryn that Jon Arryn had ever given him. Why would Peter risk all to silence the hand? For love of Lisa. Pretty girls bought love at half the price. For the veil. Peter could not hold the veil would not have him, no matter what cradled Robin called him. For the Lannisters, then. Peter was the Queen's man, or the Queen's brother's man, or the Queen's father's man, or all three. Or for himself, and the chaos he might fish in. It hardly mattered. The Lannisters were the rope from which the noose hung, whoever had lowered the loop. And the Queen, whose secret, was the one with the most to lose. He pushed back the bedclothes, pleased to find his legs still under him. The rug was cold. He sat for a moment on the edge of the bed and listened to his own heart and thought, I am 64 years old. I have served 3 kings. I have raised one. I have a wife who has tried to murder me and a kingdom that does not know I am alive. The stranger walked beside me a night and a day, and turned away. Very well, he thought. Very well, then. He called for his squire, who was not his squire any longer but a young Vale knight named Ser Edmure Royce, the cousin of the Tully boy with no sense and no fear, and whom Jon Arryn had kept close since Pycelle's draughts had begun to taste curiously bitter. Royce came at a run, gauntlet, sword belted, eyes too wide for the hour. My lord. You were told I was dying. I am not. Find Maester Coleman. Find Lord Stannis, he is at Dragonstone, but he will have a man in the city, the man is named Arstan, he will be in a tavern called the Two Crowns near the river gate. Find that man, send him a message that he is to ride, today, to Dragonstone, with this. Jon Arryn was already at the writing table. He scribbled, in his slow careful hand, 4 words, I live. Seed strong. The Lord of Dragonstone will understand. He is awaiting it. Tell him also that he must not stir from Dragonstone until he hears from me. He will want to. He will swear and break things. Tell him I command it. My lord, I am the hand, Royce. I command it. Go. Royce went. Jon Arryn turned back to his table and drew toward him a fresh sheet, and then another. He wrote 2 letters more. The first was to Eddard Stark, at Winterfell. He wrote it short and crooked, because his hand still trembled, and because Ned would forgive him the lack of poetry. He wrote, Come south. Come soon. Not to replace me, but to stand with me. The thing that was guessed at is proved. Bring no one but those you trust with every life in your keep. He sealed it, looked at it, and added beneath the seal a single word, hurry. The second letter he did not sign at first. He sat with the quill over the page, and let the ink drip and gather, and he thought of Robert. Of the boy at the Eyrie who had laughed at his swordmaster and bested him. Of the man on the trident who had broken the dragons. Of the husband at the wedding feast who had drunk 3 flagons and groped the queen and called her sister's name. Of all the Roberts, only one of whom would survive the next month. He wrote, Come to me alone. Not your council. Not your queen. Not your Kingsguard but Barristan. Come to me alone. I have news that will unmake you and I must give it to you in a room with no listeners. I am your foster father. I am your hand. I have never lied to you and I will not begin. Trust me one last time. He signed it then. He sealed it with the falcon and the moon. He held it to the candle and watched the wax pool red. Then he called Maester Coleman back, and gave him the letter, and told him to put it directly into the king's hand, no other hand, when the king woke and was sober, which would be after the hour of the bell at the latest. Coleman took it, bowed, did not ask, and went. Lisa had not stopped weeping. Jon Arryn went to her, slowly, and put his hand on her shoulder. He did not embrace her. He had loved her father and he had not loved her, and at this hour both of them knew it, and lying about it would not help. "You will be on the next galley going up the Trident," he said, "with the boy, and with such servants as I trust. Edmure will receive you at Riverrun. You will not write to Peter Baelish. You will not speak his name. If he writes to you, you will give the letter unopened to your brother, and the boy will be raised as an Arryn until the day comes that his mother is well enough to raise him otherwise. Do you understand me?" "Yes," she whispered. "Good." He kissed the top of her head, briefly, as one kisses a thing one is putting away into a chest. "I am sorry, Lisa. I should have known. Peter will be tried for what he has done, when I have him. You will give evidence, or you will not, as you choose. The choice will not be mine to take from you. But, child," he tilted her chin up, very gently, "you will not see him again." She closed her eyes, and was, briefly, the freckled girl he had married. Then she nodded. He left her to her women and walked, slowly, with the help of his cane and the low stone wall, out onto the small balcony of the tower. The red keep stretched away beneath him. Beyond it lay the Blackwater, glittering, and beyond it the salt smell of the sea, and beyond the sea the world. He could see the September of Baelor from here, and the great drum tower of Maegor's Holdfast, where the queen would be waking to her ladies and her morning bread and her certainty. He could see the windows of the rooms where the king's guard slept, he could see the white cloak that meant a man was at his post on the walk above the throne. 3 men in that cloak knew the secret. 2 of them were in the city and 1 was at Dragonstone. Not yet, he thought. Not yet. Let the queen wake unworried. Let Peter Baelish believe his letter has been delivered. Let the Lannisters in their place sit easy. The realm had lived a great lie for 15 years, and the lie had become the realm's bones. He could not break the bones cleanly. He would have to break them carefully, the way a healer breaks an old fracture and resets it. There would be screaming. There might be war. There would certainly be blood, and not all of it on people who deserved it. But the lie would end. Today, if the gods were merciful. Tomorrow, if they were not. The gods, in his experience, were rarely merciful, but they sometimes had a sense of timing. Behind him, far down in the Red Keep, the morning bell began to toll. He counted the strokes, and at 6 he turned away from the city and went to dress. He had a king to see. He paused, halfway, and went instead to the heavy oak press at the foot of his bed. Out of it he drew, from beneath 2 folded brigandines and a stack of parchment that smelt of mildew, a thick book bound in dark leather and stamped with the falcon of his house. The lineages and histories of the great houses of the 7 kingdoms, with descriptions of many high lords and noble ladies and their children. Grand Maester Mallion's masterwork, 3 pounds of paper and 400 years of bloodlines. He had had it copied at the Citadel out of his own purse and not Pycelle's, because Pycelle had been peculiar about the original when he asked. He turned to the page that began the Baratheon line and ran a slow finger down the margin. Orys Baratheon, dark of hair and dark of eye. Davos Baratheon, dark. Rabar the Burnished, dark. Argilac, dark, and a daughter Argella the same. Down through the Storm Kings to Lionel the Laughing Lord, dark, and his son Ormond, dark, and Steffan Baratheon, dark, and Steffan's 3 sons, dark, dark, dark. He turned to the Lannisters next. Lannister hair was, more often than not, the gold anlight that had so become the queen. But there was a Tyrion in there with eyes of 2 colors, and many a Leford or Marbrand consort whose color had bred truth through to grandchildren. Lannister gold did not always win. But Baratheon black, in 3 centuries of marriages, had not once lost. He shut the book and put it under his arm and went to dress. He chose his cloak with deliberate care, not the hands brocade, but a plain wool one, dark blue and fastened at the throat with the falcon and moon. A man going to wake a king to a private grief did not need pomp. He took also a small iron-bound box, locked, that contained the parchment from the orphanage in Flea Bottom, and the parchment from Chatia's brothel where one of Robert's bastards had been born of a black-haired girl, and the parchment from the Storm's End library, signed in Maester Cressen's neat hand, that confirmed there had not been a fair-haired Baratheon born to a king or a lord in 300 years. 3 pieces of parchment. They weighed less than a pound. They would weigh enough to crush a queen. Edmure Royce was waiting at the door with another guard, a Vale man Jon trusted, and Maester Coleman was halfway down the corridor with the king's letter held against his chest. Jon Arryn lifted his cane in salute, and Coleman nodded, and went. "My lord," said Edmure Royce. "The Lord Stannis's man has been found and is riding." "Good. The king?" "Still abed, my lord. Lord Renly hunted with him last night." "Well, then he will have slept hard." Jon Arryn smiled grimly. "All the better. A sober Robert is a rare animal. We shall track him to his lair while he is groggy." He set off down the corridor, the box under his arm and the falcon at his throat. The Tower of the Hand fell behind him, and the long colonnade opened, and beyond it the Red Keep waited, gold and bloody in the dawn, like a beast not yet aware that it had been wounded. Jon Arryn walked toward the king's apartments with the steady, unhurried tread of a man who has been ill, and is no longer, and intends to live a great deal longer than his enemies have planned. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, The King's Wrath. Robert Baratheon was awake. This was the first surprise of Jon Arryn's morning, and not a small one. The king was sitting at the broad table in his solar with his head in his hands and a half-empty cup before him, which Jon Arryn had expected. What he had not expected was that the cup contained water, and that Robert was reading. A creased letter lay on the table, much folded. Robert's enormous fingers were turning the corner of it back and forth like a man worrying a sore tooth. "Out," Robert said, without looking up. "All of you. Out." The 2 squires went. The 2 Tyrells lingered. Loras Tyrell, white-cloaked, was Renly's man before he was the king's, and his eyes flicked to Jon Arryn for instruction. Jon Arryn nodded, almost imperceptibly. Loras went. Ser Barristan Selmy remained, as he had been told to remain, by his Lord Commander's letter that lay still folded inside Jon Arryn's tunic. The door shut. The bar dropped. "John," said Robert, and looked up at last. There were pouches under his eyes the color of old bruises. There was a cut on his lower lip from biting it. "John. You old goat. They told me you were dead." "Not yet, Your Grace." I cried. "I want you to know that. Renly was there, and he can tell you." Robert tried to smile and made a worse expression. "I had not cried since Lioness. So if you go and die after all, I am going to be very put out with you, do you understand?" "I understand, Your Grace." "Don't Your Grace me. Sit down before you fall down, you look like a corpse. Selmy, get him a cup. John, sit. Sit." Robert lifted his huge head and looked at the closed door, and then at the closed window, and then at Jon Arryn, and the smile faded from his face. "You send me a letter that I have read 4 times and have not yet understood, and I am sober for it, which I would like noted, and you are sober as well, which is your usual state, and Selmy is sober, which is also his usual state. So let us be 3 sober men together, and you tell me what is so terrible that the hand of the king writes to him to come alone and unprepared, and then arrives armed." Jon Arryn glanced at his own waist, where his old sword in its plain scabbard hung. He had not consciously taken it up. "Habit, I suppose." "Habit. Hm." Robert looked at the box under Jon Arryn's arm. "Whatever's in that, I will not like." "No, Your Grace." "Tell me anyway." Jon Arryn sat. The chair groaned under him. He was a thinner man than he had been a year past, but every chair in this room had been built for Robert. He set the box on the table. He took the key from the chain around his neck. He opened the lid. He laid out the parchments. He laid out the leather-bound book. He laid out a small leather pouch, which held the dried purple crystals, the lees of the Strangler that Maester Coleman had filtered. He laid them out in the order in which they should be considered, like a man laying out evidence at a trial, because that was what he was about to do. Robert, he said. I have spent the last 6 months looking into the question of your bastards. Robert's eyebrows climbed. My bastards. Yes. The mother save us, Jon. Why? Because of what they have in common. Robert looked at him as if he had begun speaking Valyrian. What? Listen. Jon Arryn picked up the first parchment. Maya Stone, your daughter at Gulltown. 10 years and 3 months old. Black of hair and blue of eye. The mother was a dark girl from a brewery. Black. I remember Maya. Edric Storm, your son at Storm's End, fostered by your brother. 12 years. Black of hair, blue of eye. The mother was Lady Florent, fair as buttercream. Black. Florent. Yes. Robert's eyes were sharp now. They had cleared. Bella, your daughter at Stony September, born of the innkeeper's wife. Dark. Black. Gendry, your son in Flea Bottom, apprentice at Tobo Mott Smithy. Tall and broad-shouldered already. Black, blue. Bara, your daughter at Chataya's, 3 months old this Sunday. The mother was a red-haired girl from the Westerlands. The babe, he paused. Black. All my bastards are black, Robert said slowly. What of it? My father was black. My grandfather was black. Stefan was black, Stefan's father was black. We are bulls, Jon, we breed bulls, what of it? 16 of your bastards I have found, Robert. Some I have only heard of. 11 I have seen with my own eyes or had the testimony of an honest maester. All of them are black-haired. And? Jon Arryn pushed the leather book across the table. What is this? Malian's Lineages and Histories. Open it. Robert opened it. The book fell open at the page Jon Arryn had marked with a strip of leather. Robert read. He was a slow reader, which most men did not know about him. He read the way a strong horse pulls a heavy plow, low and deliberate. His finger ran across the bottom of the page, line by line. Black, 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 dark, black, dark of hair, dark of hair, dark of hair. 300 years, said Jon Arryn, of Baratheon men marrying every color of woman in Westeros. There is a Targaryen wife on this page. Argella Durrandon. Argella was dark, but the Targaryens were silver gold white, as you well know. Their daughter was dark. There is a Lannister there. Tya Lannister, your great-great-grandmother. She was as gold as a coin. Her son was black. Look further down. Lionel the Laughing Lord married Lady Rowan Webber, fair as moonlight. Black sons. Look at the Penroses, the Estermonts, the Selmys. Our friend Barristan's sister married Stefan's cousin, did you know? Their boy was black. Selmy. Aye, my lord, said Ser Barristan, who had not moved from the shadow by the door. Black as a crow. He died at the Trident. Black, Jon Arryn said. Always black. 300 years, Robert. A line as fixed as a star. The maesters of the Citadel call your seed strong because the trait does not bend. Black hair, blue eye, a brow like the prow of a ship. That is a Baratheon. I have walked through Storm's End and Maegor's Holdfast and looked in every portrait. There is not one fair-haired heir to the Stormlands in 300 years. Jon, said Robert. I am not stupid. Stop drawing me toward a thing and just tell me the thing. Jon Arryn breathed in and out. Joffrey is not your son. Myrcella is not yours. Tommen is not yours. There was no sound in the room. The fire in the hearth crackled the way an old man's fingers crack when he stretches them. Outside, very distant, a hammer was striking iron. Selmy did not move. The king did not move. Say that again, said Robert. The words came out flat. They did not contain any feeling Jon Arryn could identify. Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen are not your children. They are not Baratheons. The seed you have spilled with 16 women across Westeros has bred true 16 times. The seed you have spilled with the queen has bred 3 blonde children with green eyes and slim chins. They are not yours, Robert. I have proof that they are not yours. I have proof of who they are. Who, said Robert, in the same flat voice. Jon Arryn waited a long moment before he answered. They are the queen's, by her brother Jaime. She has lain with him since they were children. The serving woman in her bedchamber has confessed it. A whore at Chataya's bore your daughter and named the queen's brother as the man who came inquiring after another whore who once served the queen and disappeared. Lord Stannis has been making the same inquiry from Dragonstone, where he fled when he too began to suspect. The Lord Hand of the Small Council has been, he did not finish. Robert was already moving. The roar started somewhere deep in the king's chest, as if it had been being saved there for years. He came up out of his chair as if hauled by a chain. The cup of water went sideways and shattered against the wall. The book jumped on the table, the parchment scattered. Robert's 2 huge hands closed around the edge of the table was carved oak, an old one, for men had carried it in, and he flipped it. The table flipped. It went over with a crash like an axe in a forest. Parchments fluttered. The lineage book skidded across the rushes. The leather pouch of Strangler crystals burst and the dry purple things scattered and rolled. Jon Arryn had stepped back at the first sign and Selmy had stepped forward and the two of them watched the king of the Undulls and the first men beat his fists against the stone of his own wall until the skin of his knuckles split and bled. He bellowed. There were no words at first, only the noise of an animal that has been wounded in a cave. Then there were words. Then there were terrible words. The whore. The cunt. The cunt of cunts. Her brother, her own brother, in his bed. In his bed. He had looked at that boy, that pissant golden fucking boy, and he had felt nothing, you know what, John, nothing. I have never been able to feel any love for that boy and now I know why, now I fucking know why, Robert, where is she? Where is she, Robert? Robert, listen. I will choke her with my own 2 hands, I will throw the boy off the highest tower in this keep, I will, Robert. Jon Arryn moved between his king and the door. He was a small old man and Robert could have lifted him with one hand and thrown him across the room and they both knew it, but he stood in his way, and Selmy stood at his shoulder, and the king staggered to a halt and stared at them with the eyes of a stuck boar. Move. No, your grace. Move, John. Move or I'll move you. You will not. Robert breathed. He breathed. He breathed. He was standing in a litter of broken cup and scattered crystals. Blood ran down his right hand from his split knuckles. The room smelt of spilled water and torn paper and, faintly, of pissed-on fear, Selmy's, perhaps, though the old knight was not the kind to show it. Tell me how to make this not be true, said Robert. It is true, Robert. Tell me. Tell me how it isn't. Tell me you read something wrong. Tell me you are old and the fever has rotted your wits. I tested for the fever, said Jon Arryn, gentle as he had ever been. It is the Strangler. Lisa poured it into my wine. Peter Baelish gave it to her. Peter Baelish is the Lannisters' coin and the Queen's brother's friend. The Queen knows what I know. The Queen tried to have me killed before I could come tell you. That is not the act of an innocent woman, Robert. Robert's eyes filled. They filled and overflowed. The King of the 7 Kingdoms put his bloodied hand over his face and stood in the wreckage of his table and wept like a boy. Jon Arryn took a step forward, and stopped, because what comfort he had to give was ash. Selmy took off his white cloak, very slowly, as one removes a vestment, and laid it over the back of a chair, and stood with his shoulders bare as if to say I will not wear it for what comes next, until you tell me to put it on again. After a time, Robert said, Lyanna. Robert. Lyanna would have given me sons. She would have given me black-haired sons. They would have been bulls. Yes. I have no sons. No. And the realm thinks I have 3. Robert took his hand from his face. The tears still ran, but his eyes had changed, they had narrowed. Somewhere under all the wine and the failure and the fat, the man who had broken Rhaegar at the Trident had opened one eye. Jon. Your Grace. What do we do? The hand of the king let out a breath that he felt he had been holding since dawn. We do not run roaring through the keep. We do not draw a sword in a corridor. We do not give the Lannisters one moment of warning. Pycelle is theirs, we move him out of the way before the bell has rung again. The Queen's brother is theirs, we send Jaime out of King's Landing on a duty he cannot refuse, and we get Loras Tyrell out of the White Cloak for the same hour, because Renly will be making his own calculations soon. I have already sent to Stannis on Dragonstone. He is to keep his peace until we summon him. I have written to Eddard Stark at Winterfell, asking him to come south not as my replacement but as my second. I do not want a Stark seen striking at the Queen, but I want a Stark beside me when the Lannister levies move. We close the gates of the Red Keep at dusk. We post men we trust on the Queen's apartments and the children's apartments. We move Cersei from Maegor's into a tower with one stair. We do not lay hands on her until Jaime is out of the city, and we do not announce anything until we have her under guard and the Stark host is moving south of the Neck. Until then we say nothing. Nothing, Robert. Not to your brother Renly, not to your master of whisperers, not to your butler. Pretend you are hungover. You are good at it. Robert looked at him for a long moment, and then, astonishingly, gave a sound that was almost a laugh. I am very good at it. Yes. He wiped his face roughly with the back of his hand, smearing blood on his cheek. Sell me. Your Grace. Put your bloody cloak back on. I am not deposing you yet. As your Grace wishes. You knew none of this. I suspected the youngest, your Grace. Tommen has the look of his uncle when his uncle was a boy. I did not let myself see it. I beg your pardon. You can beg my pardon when this is over and we are all still alive. Robert's eyes went to the door, then to the window, then back to Jon Arryn. Jaime. How do we move Jaime? We send him to escort the Tyrells home from the Reach. They are not at the Reach. They are at Bitterbridge, with Renly. Renly will return to Storm's End by month's end. Jaime can be assigned to ride west with 100 men to Lord Tywin, with a sealed letter from you that asks Lord Tywin to bring his guard to King's Landing for a tourney to be held at the King's name day. Tywin will smell something. He always smells something. But he will not stop Jaime from going. He will want Jaime under his roof if he smells the wrong thing. So Jaime will come west, and we will close the city behind him. And then Tywin marches. He marches either way. We control when. Robert nodded slowly. He looked at the parchments on the floor, scattered in the spilled water, he stooped, with a grunt, and picked up the one nearest his foot. It was the deposition of the woman at Chitaya's. He read 3 lines of it and his mouth twisted. He did not put it down. And the children, he said, almost to himself. Robert. What do we do with the children, Jon? This was the question that had kept Jon Arryn awake the night before he had come close to dying. He had not found the answer. There was no answer in any book. They did not choose their mother, Robert. Joffrey. The boy is cruel. I have watched him. He is his mother's son and worse. But he is 12 years old. He is going to be deposed. He is going to be deposed. Stannis is heir. Stannis is heir. Stannis. Robert closed his eyes. Gods. Stannis. He has been loyal to you, Robert. He has been a stick up the arse of the realm since Steffan drowned. But yes. Yes. He has been loyal. Robert rubbed his face. Send for him, then. Properly, this time. I can be a brother to a man I do not love. I have done it most of my life. Renly. Renly will plot. He has been plotting since he learned how to whistle. We will deal with Renly when we deal with Renly. Robert opened his eyes again. They were red, now, but not weeping. Pycelle. I want him out of his chambers and into a black cell under the Red Keep before the 11th hour. I want every letter he has touched in a bag to be read tonight. I want his apprentice, the boy. What is the boy's name? Maester Coleman's man, Timoth. He is mine. He is Pycelle's apprentice and yours. Of course he is. Use him. I want every poison Pycelle has and every letter he has hidden. I want nothing from him I do not pry. Sell me. Your Grace. Find Ser Boros. Find Ser Meryn. Find Ser Mandon. They are all in this keep. Have men I trust confine them to their chambers. Quietly. By name they are sworn to me before they are sworn to her, but those three are dogs and they are her dogs, and if she calls they will not hesitate. Ser Barristan, you will take command of the White Cloaks on this matter. Ser Ares is in Dorne, let him stay in Dorne. Ser Preston I will see myself. Your Grace, Ser Preston is on the Queen's door now. Then he is the first to go. By the gods, has she had every Kingsguard in this keep? Robert shook his head, as if to clear it. Jaime. Riding him west takes, what, a fortnight to reach Casterly Rock. 16 days hard. And Lord Tywin will have ravens out by the second day after Jaime arrives. Aye. So we have 16 days to set the realm on a footing where Tywin's marching does not undo us. 16 days to bring Stannis up from Dragonstone, 16 days to march Stark south, 16 days to know which Tully sits with us and which Tyrell. Yes, Your Grace. Robert was quiet a long moment. I am not going to be sober for 16 days. You will be sober for the parts of them that matter, Robert. Aye. Maybe. He looked down at his bleeding hand. He flexed it, watched the blood run, made a fist. I want her to know. Before we end this. I want her to know that I know. I want her to look me in the face and see that I know. Not before Jaime is out of the city. Not before Stark is moving. But before we touch her hair I want to look at her and I want her to look at me. You will, Your Grace. No, Jon. You will, too. Both of us. I owe you that much. Jon Arryn bowed his head. Your Grace. And Lyanna, said Robert, very low. If I had had Lyanna, you did not, Robert. You had Cersei. You had her because the realm wanted peace, and a Lannister gold piece was the price. We are paying the rest of that price now. Some of it will be paid by men who were not at the bargaining table. Aye. Robert wiped his face again. Aye. Aye. Send to my brother on Dragonstone, send to Stark, send the order for Pycelle. I want the hand seal on every letter and the king's seal on every letter, today, before the bells. I will sign them with my left hand if my right will not work, that should fool no one and that is fine. Get me Selmy's brother knights. Get me a sword that is not rusted. And, Jon, yes, Your Grace. Find me my hammer. He had not asked for his hammer in 2 years. Selmy and Jon Arryn exchanged a glance over the king's bowed head, and Selmy went first, opening the door and calling softly for the squires. Jon Arryn lingered. He laid his hand on Robert's shoulder, where the muscle had once been thick as a tree bole and was now slack with wine, and squeezed. You did not deserve this, son. Robert lifted his face. The boy who had been fostered to him at the Eyrie was in his eyes for a moment, and then was gone. No man deserves this. We all get it anyway. Go, old man. Go and write your letters. I am going to sit here and drink a great deal of water and break things in a small private way until you tell me it is time." Jon Arryn went. The door of the king's solar shut behind him. Selmy came up to his elbow as they walked, and bent to him, and said quietly, "I will speak with Ser Mandan's squire myself, my lord. He owes me a debt." "Good. And the boy Joffrey? Treat him like the heir to the Iron Throne until I tell you otherwise." "He is not. He thinks he is. So does his mother. Let her sleep one more night believing it, and we will have one of the days we need." The Lord Commander of the King's Guard nodded once. They parted at the foot of the stair, and Jon Arryn climbed back to the Tower of the Hand alone, with the empty box under his arm and the parchments tucked under his cloak, and the morning bell still tolling somewhere over the city as though nothing in 7 kingdoms had changed. Behind him, dimly, like the muffled drumbeat of a heart, he could hear the King of the Undulls and the first men breaking another piece of furniture. He climbed the stairs of the Tower of the Hand more slowly than he had come down them, but with the small steady tread of a man whose legs had remembered themselves. At the landing he paused. Through the window of the corridor he could see, far below, the broad terrace of Maegor's Holdfast, and at one end of it the Queen, walking with her ladies, in the pale gold sunshine of mid-morning. She had not yet been told. She would not, by his order, be told until tomorrow at the earliest. He watched her. She moved as a queen moves who had ruled a small unchanging kingdom of her own for 15 years and intended to rule it 15 more. She had, this morning, no reason to look up at the Hand's window. She did not look up. He watched her until she had passed out of his sight. He felt, watching her, no triumph and no pity, only the strange old ache that came over a man at the moment he could see, very clearly, the shape of a life that was about to come apart, and could not, by any kindness, stop it from coming. He turned from the window. He had a clerk to find, and the High Septon to write to, and an order to send to the Master of Coin to release certain locked accounts to the Vale Guard, and 100 other small things to do before the bell rang again. The day did not pause for old men, no matter how recently the gods had restored them. He went to find his clerk. In the corridor below him, an unmarked maester was running with a sealed parchment toward the rookery. In the courtyard a Vale captain was unsaddling at the well. On the seaward wall a girl from Chataya's, who had been brought by an honest sergeant before dawn for the asking of 3 small questions, had finished her answering and was eating bread with butter on it, while 2 Vale men watched at a distance to see who would come, in the next hour, to ask after her. The keep was a clock with its small wheels turning, and Jon Arryn, the maker of the clock for 30 years, was once again at the workbench, and the wheels were turning the way he had set them. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, The Lioness at Bay. Cersei Lannister woke to the wrong morning. It was not anything she could name at first. The light through the window of Maegor's Holdfast was the same gold pink it had been 100 times before. Her ladies came in with the same tray of bread and honey and pomegranate. The same Sansa Stark sat in the antechamber doing the same dull stitch work, blushing whenever she was looked at. Cersei sat up against her pillows and stretched and smiled at her women, and the morning was as it had been. Almost. Almost. There was a wrongness in the corners of it. Sanel, who had slept in the Queen's chamber for years, was not there. A duller girl had taken her place at the foot of the bed, and would not meet the Queen's eyes. The wine on the side table had been poured too long ago and had filmed. The ravens on the roof of the rookery were silent, where ordinarily they cawed at sunrise like courtiers competing for notice. Even the dogs in the yard sounded distant. A morning had a shape, and this one's shape was off. "Where is Sanel?" she asked. "Sent for, your grace," said her dull replacement, eyes on the floor. "Sent for by whom?" "I do not know, your grace." Cersei did not let her smile slip. She had not let her smile slip for 15 years, except in the privacy of her own bedchamber and Jaime's. "Tell my brother I would breakfast with him." "Ser Jaime is not in the keep, your grace." "Of course he is in the keep. He had the night watch at the king's door." "Ser Barristan stood the king's door last night, your grace, by Lord Commander's orders." "Ser Jaime, Sir Jaime rode south at first light. With 100 men. By the king's command. They said it was a mission to the Reach. Her smile held. The muscles around her mouth had been trained for it, her face went on smiling while her stomach turned over. South to the Reach, she said, evenly. Yes, your grace. Bring me my cloak. I will go to the king. She went to the king. He was not in his apartments. The squires said he was hunting. The master of horse said he was not hunting, he was in the small council chamber. The small council chamber was empty. Lord Renly's men, who knew the queen and feared her, would not meet her eye. One of them invented a destination and stuttered over it and another tugged at his sleeve. She turned and went to the Tower of the Hand. The Tower of the Hand had 2 guards at its base and they crossed their halberds when she came up the stair. They were Vale men, Bronze Jon Royce's nephews by the look of them, and they were not afraid of her. Lord Arryn is sleeping, your grace, one of them said. Lord Arryn is dead. Lord Arryn is sleeping, your grace. She walked back across the stones of the courtyard with her chin lifted and her step easy and her mind running like a horse with the bit out. Lord Arryn was not dead. Or he was dead but the corpse was useful to someone. Or he had recovered. Or he had recovered and Lisa had told him. Or he had recovered and the maester had found the lees in the cup and there were lees in the cup. You fool, you stupid woman, you stupid, stupid woman, you let her keep the lees. She did not stupid woman herself out loud. She did not show anything. She arrived at her own apartments with the bright morning behind her, and dismissed her women, and bolted the door, and sat at the writing desk with her hands flat on it until her hands stopped shaking. They took longer than they had ever taken before. She wrote 3 letters in her head before she wrote one on parchment. The first was to Peter Baelish, where is Lysa? Where is the Strangler? What has been done? The second was to Pycelle, come to me at once. Bring nothing. Burn everything. The third was to her father, I have been sold. They know. She wrote none of them. Each, to a husband whose ear was full of poison from the wrong direction, was a knife in her own throat. She breathed. She thought. She thought of Jaime, who had ridden out at first light, ahead of any letter she could send, on a road that would have him at 100 crossings before nightfall, where he could be intercepted by anyone with a fast enough rider. She thought of Joffrey, who was at sword practice in the lower bailey under the eye of the hound and would be less than a minute's run from her if she sent for him now. She thought of Myrcella with her ladies in the gardens and Tommen with his cats in the nursery. She thought of how many of the King's Guard wore the white cloak in this keep this morning, and how many of those would draw on her brother if her brother came riding back, and how many of them would, in fact, draw on her if she stood between them and her son. She did not know. That was the unbearable part. A queen knew. A queen had built and watered and pruned every web in the keep until the keep was made of webs, and now this morning she did not know which strand was hers and which was someone else's and which was severed altogether. Sanel was gone. Pycelle's chambers were quiet, too quiet, when she stood at her window and listened, and she could see a pair of Vale guards on the stair to his rooms who had not been there yesterday. A guardsman she had bedded once, a sweet soft-faced boy named Osmond, was missing from his customary station at the Queen's Gallery. Her informer in the Stark girl's tutor's pantry had not sent the morning's chit. Her web was not missing. Her web was in someone else's hand. She sent a maid she did not know with a tray to the black cells, ostensibly for a prisoner she did not name but in truth to see if Pycelle was being held there. The maid did not return. She sent Lancel. Lancel had been her cousin and her boy and her tool and her lover all in one, and she trusted him as far as she could spit a Lannister. She told him to go down into Flea Bottom and find Peter Baelish at the Mockingbird, the brothel on Eel Alley, and bring her any letter he had to send. Lancel went. He did not return either. An hour later her ladies told her Lancel had been arrested at the Iron Gate by men in the Hand's livery. Her hands had stopped shaking. She found, to her surprise, that she was not frightened any longer. She was, in fact, very calm. The way a person is calm when she has fallen from a great height and there is nothing more to do but watch the ground come up. She did the only thing left. She went to Joffrey. He was in the lower bailey, hacking at a straw man with a wooden sword, with the hound watching with that particular bored expression that meant he was watching very closely. Joffrey turned when his mother came across the yard. He had been crowing about the cleanness of his sword stroke. He stopped crowing when he saw her face. The boy was 12. He was quick to read a queen's face when the queen was his mother. Mother. What is wrong? Nothing, my love. I want you to come with me. Where? To my apartments. I have not finished now. He came. Even Joffrey came, when she used that voice. The hound came with them. She would have preferred Sandor to be elsewhere, but the hound was a tool you could not put down without his clattering in the corridor. He fell in 2 paces behind, and Sansa Stark, seated on the bench by the cloister, lifted her face and saw the queen and the prince passing and went pink-cheeked and did not stand. Cersei would have, on a different morning, taken note and stored that ill-mannered shrinking against the day she chose to ruin the girl. She stored it now, for the same reason. A queen's habits did not break in one morning. In her apartments she shut the door and locked it and turned to face her son. He was as tall as her shoulder now. He had her hair and her chin and her eyes. He had nothing of Robert in him. Nothing. The thought was, for the first time in 12 years, unbearable. Listen to me, she said. Something has happened. What? Your Uncle Jaime has been sent away. By father? Yes. By father. Why? Because father has begun to suspect. She stopped. She could not say it to him. She had never been able to say it to him. She had told him 1,000 times he was Robert's son, and she had said it loud enough that he believed her, and the believing of it was part of his armor, and she would not be the one to take that armor away. Because father has begun to listen to your great-uncle's enemies. Mine and his. People who would make us small. Joff, listen. I want you to do something for me, today. I want you to send to your grandfather Tywin. Grandfather is at Casterly Rock. Grandfather is at Casterly Rock. I want you to send a raven to him, in your own hand and under your own seal as crown prince. I want you to write to him that the hand has gone mad with fever and is whispering treason against the queen, and that the king has gone hunting and is not himself. I want you to ask grandfather to ride to King's Landing at the head of his guard, with all the strength he can take, to escort his daughter and his grandsons to safety. You will sign it. I will dictate the words. Joffrey's face had been bewildered and was now, briefly, transfigured by the flush of importance. He liked to be asked to be a prince. He liked, even more, to be told his grandfather was being summoned to put down enemies. Grandfather will come, he said. Grandfather will come. But, Joff, she touched his cheek, and he scowled and submitted, you will write the letter and you will not show it to anyone, and you will give it to no one but the master of ravens, and you will stand there until you see the bird in the air. Do you understand? Yes, mother. And Joff. She held him by both shoulders. You are my son. You are everything I have. Whatever happens today, whatever they tell you, whatever your father says, you are mine. He stared up at her, and she saw, briefly, the boy she had been a mother to between his cruelties, spoiled and afraid. He nodded. She let him go. She turned to her writing desk, and dipped her quill in the ink, and dictated, slowly and clearly, the words that her son would write in his own hand to her father at Casterly Rock. They were not many. The fewer the better. The rookery would be watched. The bird might be killed by an arrow. The letter was a single line of warning, but it was enough. Tywin Lannister would read it and ride within the hour. She would not learn until a day later that another raven had already been sent. That Pycelle, even as the guards came up his stairs, had thrust a folded slip into the leg of his fastest bird and let the bird out the window of his rookery. That bird had reached Casterly Rock at dawn that same morning, and been read at noon, and Lord Tywin had been already dressed and already in his solar with his maps when Joffrey's seal arrived. Tywin Lannister was a man who did not need 2 ravens to act. He was already acting. But Cersei did not know that. She thought she had bought herself time. She sent Joffrey to the rookery with the letter. She sent him with the hound, because the hound was the only protection she trusted who was not a wearing white cloak. She watched from her window until she saw a single black bird climb out over the September of Baelor and turn west. Then she sent for her uncle Kevin, who was in the city with a small company of Lannister men staying at the Lannister manse. She did not know if her message would reach him. She sent it anyway. Then she sent for Lancel, although she had been told Lancel was taken. Then she sat. She sat with the door bolted and her ladies dismissed and her cup poured but not drunk and watched the door. When the knock came it was after the 3rd hour of afternoon, and the bell of the September had been rung for noonday twice, a strange double strike that the Queen did not understand because she had no one left to ask. The knock was authoritative without being violent. The voice on the other side of the door was Ser Barristan Selmy's. "Your Grace. The king requests your presence. The king is hunting. The king is in the small council chamber, your grace, and requests your presence at once." She rose. She dressed her hair. She rouged her cheeks, lightly, the way a queen rouges them and not the way a girl in a brothel does. She put on the necklace of golden lions her father had given her on the day she was made queen. She picked up her gloves, and put them down again, and chose another pair, of red kid leather, that better suited her humor. Then she opened the door. Ser Barristan was alone, in his white cloak. He was as old and as straight-backed as he had ever been. He inclined his head, and stepped aside, and 4 other men in mailed veil livery flanked her down the corridor. They did not touch her. They did not need to. "Where is Ser Boros?" she asked. "Confined to his chamber, your grace." "Ser Mandon?" "Confined." "Ser Meryn?" "Confined." "Ser Preston?" "Resigned his cloak. Returned to House Greenfield." "Ser Ares?" "In Dorne, your grace." "Ser Barristan?" "Your grace. You have been busy this morning." "Yes, your grace." "And my lord husband?" "He is, well. As well as a man may be on this day, your grace." She did not ask any other question. They walked the rest of the way in silence, the queen and her old gallant escort, down the long stair from Maegor's Holdfast, across the colonnade, into the Tower of the Hand where she had not, in all her queenship, been comfortable. The doors of the small council chamber stood open. The small council was not in session, in that there was no Renly, no Peter, no Pycelle, no Varys, no Stannis. There were, in the chamber, 3 men only. Robert sat at the council table with his back to the window, in a tunic that fit him tightly across the chest and a cloak the color of old wine. He was sober. His knuckles were bound up in white linen. He did not stand for her. He was not looking at her either, when she came in. He was looking at his hands. Lord Arryn sat at the king's right, in the hand's brocade now, with the falcon and moon at his shoulder. He was thinner than she remembered. 2 days dying had carved him. He was not smiling at her. He had never smiled at her. The third man was Ser Barristan, who took his place at the king's other shoulder, and bowed his head, and said, "Your grace." "Lord Hand." "The Queen." "Cersei." Robert lifted his head and looked at her then, and the look on his face was not an expression she had ever seen on him. It was not anger, although there was anger under it. It was not grief, although there was grief under it. It was the very still, very quiet look of a man who had, in the last hour, taken 1/2 of his own life and put it on a shelf that he was not going to reach for again. "Sit. Husband, sit." She sat. The chair at the foot of the table was the chair the council put visitors in. It was made for unease. She arranged her skirts. She placed her hands one over the other, palms down, the way her septa had taught her 30 years ago. Robert turned a piece of parchment toward her. It was the deposition from Chatias. She did not need to read it, she knew what it would say. She read it anyway, slowly, to give herself time. When she finished, she lifted her face and met her husband's eyes for the first time in many months. "Tell me it is a lie, Cersei." She had practiced for many endings. She had practiced poison and proclamation and pretty grief. She had not practiced this. She had been so sure she would have a knife to put in him, or a cup, or a courtier with a story, when this moment came. She had been so sure she would have her brother at her side. She had been so sure she would have Pycelle. She had built, for 15 years, an edifice in which her secret was kept by the strength of every wall she had set against it. And the walls had come down in a night without her hearing one of them fall. She did not lie. She was Tywin Lannister's daughter, she had not lied very often even when lying was the better course, she was too proud for it. "It is the truth, your grace." The silence was very long. Robert closed his eyes. Jon Arryn did not. Jon Arryn looked at her with the same sober disinterest with which a man examines a wound he is about to set, and she found, looking back at him, that she hated him more in this moment than she had hated anyone in a long career of hatreds. He was the one. He had been digging at the edge of her secret since the boar hunt, and she had thought him a doddering old man with a curiosity that could be patted away, and he had been digging her grave. "How long?" said Robert, eyes still shut. "Since I was 13. Since Jaime was 13. Before you, my lord. And Joffrey. Joffrey is Jaime's. As are Myrcella and Tommen. And the babes that died in the cradle. The dark-haired one. That one was yours." He laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was not a laugh at all, in the end, it was a sound a man makes at the bottom of a well. "You let her die, did you? The black-haired one. She died of the croup, your grace. She died of the croup." He opened his eyes. They were red. They were, also, very clear. "Cersei. I want you to understand. I am not going to kill you today. I am not going to kill you tomorrow. I am not going to kill our children. I would like to. I would like, this very moment, to take you by your golden throat, and squeeze, and watch your face go the color of the cloak Selmy wears. I will not do that, because I am the king, and because Lord Arryn has reminded me that I am the king, and because there are 6 men under arms on my side in this keep and there are 40 under arms on yours, and a king who throttles a queen on the wrong day starts a war he cannot win. But I will not kill you also because I am told it is in my interest to be merciful, and I have not been merciful before, and I am told I should try. Your grace, be quiet." She was quiet. "You are confined," said Jon Arryn, in his hand's voice, "to your apartments in Maegor's Holdfast, with a guard you do not choose, and a maester you do not choose, and one woman of your household whom we will choose for you. You will write no letters. You will receive no visitors but your father, when he comes, and your father will come. Your children will be removed from your care this evening. Joffrey will be confined to the maiden vault under guard. Myrcella and Tommen will go to the keep of the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, who will see to their persons until other arrangements are made. You will not see them. You will not speak to them. If you give any signal to any servant in any keep, you will be moved to a black cell, and we will be done with this courtesy." "My brother," she said. "Your brother," said Robert, "is on the road to Casterly Rock with 100 men, except that he is not, because he is on the road back to King's Landing, because somebody told him, because somebody always tells him. We will take care of your brother when your brother arrives. We are speaking of you. You will not harm my children. I will not lay my hand on a hair of any of those 3 children," said Robert. "That is my word as their father, which I am not, but I have been their father for 12 years and I will not be less than that on the day I cease to be." His mouth twisted. "Whatever else I am, Cersei, I do not murder children. I leave that, apparently, to my brothers-in-law. She stared at him. He had become, in an afternoon, a man she did not recognize. Not the drunk. Not the boy at the Trident, that she had only ever seen in tapestries. This was a third Robert, that the years had hidden, who had been waiting under all the wine. He was a king. She had not, in 15 years, been ruled by a king. The realization came on her like cold water down her back. Take her, said Robert. Ser Barristan put his hand on her elbow with the tenderness of a son to a mother. She did not flinch. She walked out of the council chamber on her own feet, head high, smile fixed, the way Tywin's daughter had been taught to walk through any door. She did not see, behind her, the king put his face down on his folded arms on the council table, like a child who has worked very hard not to cry in front of the world, and finally has the world to himself. She did see, on her way back across the colonnade, a single black raven climb up off the southwestern tower and fly west. The bell was ringing again, the long single stroke that meant, in the city below, that someone of consequence had died. Jon Arryn was not dead. She had a thought, terrible and clear and useful, as she climbed the stair under guard back to her apartments. Lord Tywin would receive her son's letter in 8 days. Lord Tywin would already have received Pycelles, which she had not authorized. Lord Tywin would already, if she knew her father, be on the move. Lord Tywin would not be coming to escort her to safety. Lord Tywin would be coming to take the city. Lord Tywin would do what Tywin always did, which was burn the road behind him as he advanced, so that no door he had passed could close on his back. The door of her apartments shut behind her. The bolt slid home, on the outside this time. She stood in the center of her own chamber with her gloves in her hand and looked at the empty cradle where her crowning son had once been rocked, and she said, aloud, to no one, in her voice that had been a girl's at 13 and a queen's at 16 and was now a queen still, Jaime. Jaime, my love. Come home. Far to the north of the city, on the King's Road below the Hayford lands, Ser Jaime Lannister had reined in his horse on a stretch of churned mud, and was reading, by the morning sun, a letter that a Lannister rider had just put into his hand. He read it twice. He read it 3 times. He folded it. He sat his horse for a long minute looking at the pale spring grass and the distant smoke of farm chimneys. He lifted his head and called for his captain. Ser Adam. Ser. We are going back. Back to King's Landing, Ser. Back to King's Landing. I have left a sister in a place where I should not have left a sister. We are going to fetch her. Ser, the king, I know what the king commanded. Find me the men of Casterly birth in this column. Send the rest on west to my father with this letter, he was already writing, on his pommel, in the small hard hand of his house, and tell them to ride hard. The Casterly men ride south with me. His captain did not argue. Jaime turned his horse on the spot. The horse was a Lannister gelding, red as the dawn behind it. He set his heels to its flanks. The road back to King's Landing ran open before him, and behind him 100 riders divided like a stream divides at a stone, and the morning bell of the city began, very faintly, to be audible to his ears, 8 leagues out, on the wind. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, A wolf come south. Winter had not yet come, but the wind off the wall remembered it. Eddard Stark stood on the parapet of the inner wall of Winterfell at the first grey of dawn, hands gripping the stone, eyes on the god's wood where the heart tree was still in shadow. He had slept 3 hours. He had slept 3 hours every night since the raven from the Vale, because his dreams had been doing him the discourtesy of returning Robert and Lioness to him both. He preferred his nights waking. He had not been the kind of man to ride out from Winterfell at midwinter, but he was about to become that kind of man, and he was teaching himself to be it by the stones. Catelyn came up the stair behind him, a fur over her shoulders. She did not speak at first. She had not slept either. She came and stood at his side and put her hand on the same stone and looked out over the god's wood with him. Robb does not understand, she said. He understands as much as he can. He is 15. He understands that I am leaving and he is staying. He wants to ride. I know. I will not take him. He will keep the north. He cannot keep the north. He is a boy. Then it will be a boy's north until I come back. The Manderleys will keep the coast. The Mormonts will keep the Bare Isle. The Karstarks will hold the Kingsroad. Howland Reed has my word and my word has his, and the Boltons, he shrugged a shoulder, will not move while Reed sits between them and the south. And me. He did look at her then. He had not been able to look at her, because he had not yet found the words. He found them now, simple ones, in the cold. And you, Cat. You hold Winterfell. You hold the children. If I do not come back, you will come back. If I do not come back, you take the children to the Eyrie, by sea if you can, by mountain road if you must. Lisa is at Riverrun, by Jon Arryn's letter, the Eyrie is empty but for Jon Royce and his men, and they are loyal. Robb is heir to Winterfell. He will be Lord Stark of Winterfell whether I come home or not. If you do not hear from me in a year, do not look for me. Take the children north. Do not look back. Ned. Cat. She did not weep. She had not been a weeping woman in 20 years. She put her cold hand against his cheek and held it there a moment, and they stood together in the wind off the wall, and below them in the godswood the heart tree opened its red eyes to the rising sun. What is it that he asks of you, she said, finally. Truly. The hand. Ned considered. He had not, in the 3 days since the raven came, told her. Jon Arryn had asked for trust, and Ned Stark had given trust as a matter of habit when the word came from Jon Arryn. But Cat was Cat, and she was about to be Cat alone in Winterfell with 3 children and an heir and a north to hold, and she would do it better if she knew. He has proof, he said, that the Queen's children are not Robert's. The Queen has lain with her brother. Jon found it out. They tried to kill him for it. He survived. He has told Robert. He wants me at his shoulder when the Lannisters move on the city. She closed her eyes. The wind moved her hair. When she opened her eyes again they were calm, the way river water is calm where it runs deepest. And the Lannisters will move. Tywin is already moving. Jon's letter is 2 days old. Tywin will be at the Golden Tooth within the week. And Jaime. Jaime, gods know. Jon writes that Jaime was sent west when the Queen was taken. Whether Jaime turned back is not yet known to me. He may be in the city again before I am south of the Neck. Ned. The boy. Joffrey. What will Robert do with the boy? That is Robert's to do. Not mine. I will not stand before Robert and tell him what to do with a boy that he has called his son for 12 years, even if the boy is not his. He will kill him. He says he will not. He will kill him, Ned. It will not be Robert who does it. It will be Stannis, or Renly, or someone who sees a danger that Robert is too soft to see. The boy is 12 and the boy will be a gathering point for every Lannister still standing at the end of this. Whoever wears the crown after Robert will not let that boy live. Then the gods help us all, he said, for what we will be. She nodded once. She turned, and went down the stair, and Ned stood a moment longer with his hands on the stone, and watched the sun climb over the wall. Then he went down to the yard and called for his horse, and his men, and his sword. By the 2nd hour after dawn he was riding south with 100 men of the north, his sword ice across his back, and his eldest daughter Sansa nowhere in his column because she was not yet in King's Landing. He had not, in this telling, brought her south, and his bastard son Jon Snow at the wall, where he would not, the gods willing, hear of any of this until it was finished. Behind him, on the parapet of Winterfell, his lady wife stood and watched him ride out, and did not weep, and did not move, until she could no longer see the standard of the dire wolf against the pale spring sky. At Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon was reading. He had, in the 7 days since he had received Lord Arryn's first message, the forward slip carried by a tavern man named Arstan, riding hard on a horse not bred for it, done very little but read. He had read every dispatch the Lord of Dragonstone's small staff could fetch him. He had read every report Davos had brought from the city. He had read, again, the report from his own maester at Storm's End on the colour of his nephew Edric's hair, and the colour of his late father's hair, and the colour of the hair of the 7 Baratheons who had ruled in the last 100 years, and the colour of the hair of every single bastard of Robert's that the maester had been able to confirm. He had read his brother's letter, which had come in the second raven, sealed with the king's stag, and in his brother's hand, which Stannis remembered with a violence that surprised him. "Brother," it began, with no other salutation, because Robert never used another, "the thing you and I both knew is now confirmed. The hand has lived. The whore is in custody. I am sending for you not because I want you, I have never wanted you, I will not lie at this hour, but because the realm needs you, and because you are my heir. The boy on the throne is not my heir, as you know. I require you here within 10 days. Bring no army. Bring Davos and that maester of yours and your wife if you must. The realm is going to want to look at the man it has been refusing to look at. Look back at it. Robert." Stannis had read the letter 3 times, in different lights. He had read it once at his desk, once at the high window looking south to the smoke of King's Landing on the horizon, and once in the sept where his wife had insisted on lighting candles to the mother. He had read it the 3rd time without expression. He had folded it carefully, edges aligning. He had put it into the box where he kept letters he intended to keep. Then he had said, to the room, to Davos who stood by the door, "Set sail at dawn." "Aye, my lord," said Davos. "And the fleet?" "Let the fleet stand to. We sail in one ship. The Fury. She does not need to look like a war. She needs to look like a king's heir coming home." "Aye, my lord." Davos. "Aye." Stannis had looked, for a moment, like a man who has been carrying a weight so long he has forgotten he carries it, and has just now set it down and discovered his shoulders. "He believed me," he said. "After everything. He believed me. He did, my lord. Do not say it kindly, Davos. I do not require kindness in this hour." "As you wish, my lord." He stood looking out the window at his wife in the courtyard below, who was instructing his daughter in the proper way to fold a kerchief, at the Red Priestess whom he had not yet decided whether to keep at Dragonstone or to send away, at the gulls, at the ship he had built when the realm had forgotten him, which would now bear him in a journey for which he had not been prepared, because he had not, in the long years of his exile, allowed himself to be prepared. The realm had refused to look at him for 15 years. He would walk into the small council chamber the day after tomorrow and he would meet the realm's eyes as if he had been waiting for it, and he had been waiting for it, and only Davos in the doorway would know how unused he was to being waited for. At Bitterbridge, Renly Baratheon was being told the news by his lover. Loras had ridden through the night from King's Landing with a dispatch hidden in his white doublet. He was no longer, technically, of the Kingsguard. Lord Arryn had quietly stripped his cloak the morning he had sent Cersei to her apartments under guard, and Loras had not protested, and now, in the tower at Bitterbridge that the Tyrells had loaned them for the spring tourney, Loras stood with his hand on the back of Renly's chair and said the thing aloud. "Joffrey is to be deposed. Aye. Stannis is to be heir. Aye. Renly. They have not even mentioned you." Renly Baratheon was sitting at a table covered in plans for a tourney that was no longer going to happen. He had a piece of marzipan in one hand. He had been eating marzipan for 3 months, ever since he had decided to be king. He looked at the marzipan. "I had not expected them to mention me," he said. "You are Robert's brother. Stannis is also Robert's brother, and the older. The realm has not wanted to think about Stannis for 15 years. It will be made to think about him now. You are loved. He is not. I am loved by the wrong people for this season, Loras." He set the marzipan down. He had been planning, this week, to bring Margaery to the king's bed, and within a year a Tyrell girl would have been queen, and within 5 he would be Lord Protector, and within 10 he would have Joffrey beheaded for his crimes and Stannis kicked back to Dragonstone and the throne would be his. He had laid out the plan in his mind so often it had taken up the shape of memory. The plan was rubble now, knocked flat by an old man at the Eyrie who had not died on the appointed day. "What will we do?" "We will not do anything for a fortnight," Renly said. "We will not raise a banner. We will not write to my brother on Dragonstone. We will not write to the king. We will sit here at Bitterbridge with the Tyrells and we will be a calm and obedient lord. We will let the Lannisters and my brothers tear at each other. We will count who falls and who stands. Then we will make ourselves useful to whoever is left." Renly. "Your brother." "My brothers are about to do me the great kindness of weakening each other." He smiled, but the smile was thin, and Loras knew the thinness of it. "Stannis cannot rule the realm. He is a stick. He will give offense in every direction. He will lose lords. He will lose small folk. He will not lose Mace Tyrell, because we will see to that. When the time comes and Stannis has worn himself out, the realm will remember that there is a younger brother who knows how to feast and how to forgive. We will not be in a hurry. Hurry is the death of a Baratheon. And Marjorie. Marjorie will not be queen this year. She may be queen another year. We have time, Loras. We have time." He put his hand over Loras's hand on the chair back, and squeezed, and Loras squeezed back, and they did not speak again until the candle had burned an inch lower. In another tower of Bitterbridge, Mace Tyrell was reading the same news, and laughing the wrong way for it, and his mother was tapping her cane against his shin to make him be still. In King's Landing, that morning, Peter Baelish was already dressed in clothes he did not own, and was already on the 3rd boat of the day to Pentos, and would be in Pentos in 6 days, where he would discover that his Pentoshi banker was more interested in returning his deposits to the new master of coin in King's Landing than in keeping faith with a thin man with an iron bird brooch. Peter Baelish had been a clever man for a long time. He had not been quite clever enough for this season. He would be a smaller, paler man within the year, by accounts. But this had not yet happened. This morning, as the first ravens went out and the queen sat in her chambers and the king sat with his face on his arms, Peter was standing on the deck of a fishing boat under the name Bran Stiltskin, and was looking back at the city in which he had spent 10 years building a tower of webs, and was not weeping, because Peter Baelish did not weep. He was thinking. He was a man, even now, who could think his way out of most rooms. He was thinking that he had perhaps 2 years before the realm's new masters thought of him, that he had a small chest of gold buried under a tile in a brothel he owned in Pentos, that he had a Stiltskin name that nobody in Westeros had ever heard. He was thinking that Lisa Tully was no longer a useful asset, but that her son was a lord paramount and an idiot, and that idiots could be approached again, eventually. He was thinking that a clever man could come back from anywhere if he had patience. He was thinking that he had loved Catelyn Tully for 30 years, and would, perhaps, love her 30 more, and would never lay eyes on her again, and that this was not the worst loss of the day. The fishing boat caught the tide. The city slid down the horizon. He lit a candle in his pocket against the wind. He did not look back. In a corridor not far from the small council chamber, Lord Varys, Master of Whisperers, encountered Lord Arryn coming out of the king's apartments with a stack of letters under his arm. Varys stopped, and bowed his head, and clasped his hands inside the wide sleeves of his robe, and waited to be addressed. Varys. My Lord Hand. You have not come to me this week. I have not, my lord. Why not? I was told, my lord, that the Hand was unwell. I did not wish to disturb him. You were told by whom? By a little bird. A little bird who works for the Queen. A little bird who has worked for many people, my lord. I will not pretend otherwise. And now? Now, Varys said, gently, the little bird is in a pie. I am sorry, my lord, that I did not come to you sooner. I had not believed you would survive. When I saw, 3 days passed, that you had survived, I had also to consider whether you would be displeased with me for not having warned you of the cup. I do not always come well into rooms where people are angry with me. I have, often, the feeling I will not come out of them again. Jon Arryn looked at him for a long moment. Varys met the look, mildly, with the round-eyed patience of a man who had spent his life being looked at without weight. Varys. My lord. The realm needs you, more than it needs me. The realm will need you when I am dead. I do not have time today to weigh whether you are mine, or hers, or his, or your own. I will choose, today, to assume you are the realm's. If I am wrong I will have you flayed before I die. Do we understand each other? With perfect clarity, my lord. Then write to your little birds in Casterly Rock. I want to know which gates Lord Tywin opens, and which roads he takes, and which lords ride with him, and how many spears each lord brings, and whether his maester sends his ravens by night or by day. You will not, in any of these letters, mention my name, the king's name, or the name of any of my plans. You will sign them as you have always signed them. You will report to me daily, in this office, before the third bell. Yes, my lord. Varys. My lord. What was Peter Baelish doing at the dock last night? Varys's face did not change, but his eyes warmed by a hair. Boarding a fishing boat, my lord, dressed as a fishmonger, under the name of a children's tale. I sent 2 of my birds with him. Wherever he lights, my lord, we will know. He will have a great many years ahead of him in which to wonder how he became uninteresting. Good. And, my lord, yes. There is, on Dragonstone, a red priestess who has been gathering to herself the ear of the king's brother. I am of the opinion that she is more dangerous than 3 Tywins. If you have a moment, in the days ahead, to remove her from the field, I would be in your debt. Jon Arryn stopped. He turned in the corridor and looked at the eunuch with new eyes. A red priestess. Of R'hllor. From As High. She tells the Lord Stannis that he is the prince that was promised. He has not yet believed her. He will. He is a man who has needed for a long time to be promised something. Very well. She is on my list. Thank you, my lord. Write your letters, Varys. At once, my lord. The eunuch melted away into a passage that, to Jon Arryn's knowledge, had not opened upon a passage. Jon Arryn walked on. He had a meeting in 2 hours with Stannis's man Davos at the gate, an hour after that with the captain of the Stark Guard who had ridden in advance of his lord, and an hour after that with the king and the Lord Commander of the King's Guard about the disposition of 3 children. He would, he hoped, be in his bed by midnight. He would not be in his bed by midnight. None of them would be in their beds by midnight. The realm did not sleep when its bones were being reset. He walked on with the falcon at his shoulder, and the morning bell tolled somewhere in the city, and the gulls turned over the Blackwater, and the wheel began, slowly, to grind. At Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister read his letters in the order they had arrived. The first was from Pycelle, in a hand made trembly by the haste of writing under threat of capture. It was 3 lines. It said, "They know. The hand lives. Save us." Tywin had read it once and laid it aside. The second, 2 hours later, was from Joffrey, in his grandson's careful tutored hand, sealed with the prince's seal. It said the hand had gone mad with fever and that the king was hunting and that the queen required her father's escort to safety. Tywin had read this one twice. He had laid it on top of the first. The third had come at dusk. It was from a small bird in a small attic in King's Landing, and it bore no signature, and it said, in 5 words, "Cersei is taken." Jaime turned. Tywin had read it once. He had folded it. He had laid it on top of the other 2. He had not summoned anyone. He had stood, alone, at the window of his solar, and looked out over the sunset sea, and considered. A lesser man would have torn his hair. A lesser man would have flown into the yard shouting for horses and bannermen. Tywin Lannister did neither. Tywin Lannister did not fly. Tywin Lannister had not, in 50 years, raised his voice in his own keep. He had thought, instead. He had thought, in order, he had thought of his daughter, who had been sold for a kingdom and had bought him 3 royal grandchildren and a place at the end of every history book ever written about the realm, and who had now lost the kingdom in a single afternoon by a carelessness that he had warned her against ever since the morning he had found her in a bed where she should not have been at 14 years old. He had thought of his son, who had been beautiful and golden and the finest sword in Westeros, and who was now riding back to a city where he would either rescue his sister or die in the attempt or, Tywin's mouth had tightened, here, both. He had thought of Tyrion, who was at the Rock, who was useful, who was clever in the way Tywin did not care to be clever, and who would have, very promptly, 3 things to say to him as soon as he heard, all of them rude. He had thought of his grandson Joffrey, whom he had never liked but who was, by law, the heir to the Iron Throne and would now, by law, become a bastard. He had thought of his other grandchildren and was grateful that they had been kept out of his sight. He had thought of his late wife, briefly, and of his sister Jenna, and of his brother Kevin, who would be in the city, who would be in danger, who would, with luck, get out alive and ride home. He had thought of Robert Baratheon, who was a fool, and of Jon Arryn, who was not, and of Eddard Stark, who was honorable to a fault and was riding south even now, and of Stannis Baratheon, who was a man Tywin had always disliked and feared in equal measure because Stannis was the kind of man who could not be bought. He had thought of which of these he could turn, and which of these he could trade, and which of these he would have to break. He had thought, last, of the West. Of the gold mines that would not, after this season, be spending their gold on Lannister soldiers. Of the bannermen who would, after this season, not be bannermen. Of the long generations of his line that would, after this season, be told the Westerlands were a reach vassal or a storm cousin and that the Lannisters had once been kings before they had been sold into bastardy. He had thought of Jaime, his son, who would not, after this season, sit the chair of Casterly Rock unless Tywin moved very fast. He had thought, and at the end of his thinking he had said to the cold sea below his window, I will not lose the West. Then he had turned from the window and walked to his door and called for his steward. Send the ravens, he said. All of them. Craighall. Marbrand. Lefford. Banefort. Rain. Sarsfield. Liddon. Estren. Brax. Plum. The Tooth. The Banefort. Every gate of the Reach that owes me a debt. Every man of the West who can ride. 20,000 spears at the Tooth in 12 days. The fleet at Lannisport in 15. We march at the new moon, and we march east. My lord. And the maester. My lord. Bring me the maester. I have a letter to dictate to my dear cousin Roose Bolton, who will, I believe, be very interested to learn that his Stark liege is riding south to a war he cannot win. My lord. The steward bowed and went. Tywin Lannister sat at his desk. He took up his quill. Outside, the bells of Lannisport began to ring, in the order he had given them long ago to be rung when the West must rise. He did not pause. He had a great many letters to write before nightfall, and he had not, in 50 years, missed a deadline. When at last he raised his head, the sun was setting on the sunset sea, and the great mountain over Casterly Rock was burning red at its top. Tywin Lannister wrote 3 more lines, sealed 3 more letters, called for 3 more ravens. Somewhere in the keep below him a child was laughing, one of Jenna's grandchildren, perhaps, or a kitchen maid's. He paid it no mind. The realm was about to be set on its head, and the head was going to land in the West, and the West was going to be ready when it landed. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. The Lion's Gambit. Jaime Lannister rode into King's Landing through the river gate at the 2nd hour of afternoon, 3 days after he had left it, with 22 men at his back and a horse beneath him whose flanks had been bloody for an hour. The gate was closed. He had expected the gate to be closed. He had not expected the captain on the wall above it to be Ser Edmure Royce, of the Vale, with 30 crossbowmen on the rampart at the captain's back and a steady voice that did not waver when he called down through cupped hands. Ser Jaime. Ser, open the gate. Lay down your arms and the gate will open, Ser. I am the Queen's brother. I require to enter the King's city. You may enter unarmed, Ser. If you and your men dismount, surrender your weapons to me, and submit to be conducted under guard, the gate will open. Those are the orders of the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, signed under his hand. Jaime looked up at the wall. He looked down at his right hand, gloved, on his pommel. He looked at the bloody flank of his horse. He looked at his captain, Ser Adam Marbrand, whose family had served his for 100 years. Adam, he said. If I order you, today, to charge a closed gate, what do you say to me? I say that the gate is closed, Ser, and we are 22. And if I told you a queen of the realm depends upon it? I say that a queen of the realm does not depend on 22 men at a closed gate, Ser. You are a wiser man than your liege. I am, Ser. Jaime laughed, short and bitter, and the men around him did not laugh with him. He looked again up at the wall. He thought of his sister, who would, by now, have been in custody for 3 days. He thought of his children, whom he had never been allowed to call his children, and whom by now no one in the keep would let him call anything. He thought of his father, riding east with the rage of the Rain Tarbeck behind him. He thought of the man on the gate above him, who was a young Vale knight he had never met, and who was perfectly correct on every point. He turned in the saddle. Ser Adam. The Casterly men ride west. Take the road to Stony September and from there to the Tooth. Tell my lord father what you have seen. And you, Ser. I will go in unarmed, as the captain requires. Ser Adam. I am not asking your counsel in this hour. Marbrand's face was unreadable. He saluted. He turned his horse. 21 Lannister riders followed him, in a long thin column, away from the closed gate and the city above it, west onto the King's Road. They did not look back. Jaime walked his horse forward. He stopped under the wall. He undid the buckle of his sword belt. He laid his sword, in its plain traveling scabbard, across the pommel of his saddle. He took off his gauntlets. He set them on top of the sword. He took off his cloak, gold and crimson, and laid it over the gauntlets. He sat in his saddle in his shirt, with his arms loose at his sides, and looked up at Edmure Royce. Ser. As you have asked. Dismount, please, Ser. As you say. He dismounted. The horse, blowing, stayed with him. The gate ground opened 6 inches, and 10 inches, and a foot, and a Vale spearman came out cautiously, and another, and Jaime stepped forward into the dim mouth of the gatehouse and did not, when the iron clanged shut behind him, allow his face to change. They did not put him in the black cells. That, he was given to understand by the cool young knight who walked at his elbow, would have been a violation of his rank. They put him in a tower room in the maiden vault, with an unbarred window over a 60-foot drop and a door barred by 2 men in Vale livery and a tray of bread and water on a stool. He sat on the bed. He looked at the bread. He did not eat. He had been there an hour, by his estimate, when the door opened and a man came in alone. The man was Ser Barristan Selmy. He shut the door behind him. Lord Commander. Ser Jaime. I take it I am no longer of the King's Guard. You are no longer of the King's Guard. The Lord Commander has revoked your cloak, by order of the King, on the grounds of treason against the King's person and against the realm. Treason. I, Ser. Of what kind? Selmy's face, which had been carved from some stone the gods had used only once, flexed a half-inch. The treason of which you are accused is plain to both of us, Ser. It does not need to be spoken in this room. I would prefer to hear it spoken. Then I will say it. You have lain with your sister, the Queen, throughout her marriage to the King. Her 3 children are not the King's. You are their father. This is the treason. Jaime sat very still on the edge of the bed. He had been many things in his life. Kingslayer. Oathbreaker. Sister fucker. He had been called all of these in private, by men who whispered. He had not, in 15 years, been called any of them in a room that contained only Selmy and himself. Selmy spoke them as a man speaks, who has spoken them once before to a small council and is now speaking them once more to the man they describe. "I," said Jaime, after a long moment. "All of that." Selmy bowed his head, briefly. He said nothing for a count of 3. Then he said, "The king's pleasure is that you will live." His pleasure. His pleasure, his order, and the hand's recommendation. You will live, you will be taken to the wall, you will take the black, and you will not return to the south for the rest of your days, on pain of beheading. Your sister will live also, on similar terms. Joffrey will live. Myrcella and Tommen will live. The king has ordered, against the counsel of his hand and his brother, that no children of his queen shall die for the crime of their parents. Jaime closed his eyes. He had, in 5 days of riding, prepared himself for almost any news but this. He had thought he would arrive to a city in which his sister had been beheaded. He had thought he would arrive to a city in which Joffrey hung from a hook on the river wall. He had thought he would die at the gate. He had not thought that Robert, would be the one to spare them. He has changed, he said. He has been changed, sire. By what? By the truth, sire. Some men are made worse by it. Others are made into the men they should have been. Selmy. Sire. My sister. May I see her? No, sire. The king's order is that you will not see her again. He intends mercy. He does not intend reunion. And my children? You will not see them again either, sire. Then take me to the wall now, and let me die on the way of fever, because I cannot bear, sire. Selmy lifted a hand. You are a young man. You will go to the wall and you will be a man of the watch, and you will, in time, find that there are other things in the world than the things you cannot have. I have lived a long life. I have lost women I loved. I have lost causes I had pledged my sword to. I will not insult you by saying you will be happy. But you will be, at the end, a man who has done some good in the world, and you will not have hung from a wall for it. Take that. Take it with both hands. He turned to go. Selmy. Sire. Tell my brother, when he comes, that I am sorry. Which brother? The little one. Tell Tyrion. Selmy bowed once, more deeply than a Lord Commander needed to bow to a man who had been stripped of his cloak. Then he opened the door, and went, and the bar dropped behind him with the small heavy click of a lock that was no longer being argued with. In the small council chamber, that same afternoon, the king of the Undulls and the first men sat with his hands flat on the table and listened. He listened to Lord Stannis Baratheon, who had arrived at noon on the deck of the Fury and had walked into the chamber with the grim face of a man who had not been welcome anywhere for 15 years and was determined not to start being welcome now. Stannis had been spare in his words. He had said, "Your Grace. Brother. I am here as your heir. I require nothing of you. I will give you what is owed." That had been all. He listened to Lord Eddard Stark, who had ridden into the city through the Lion Gate at first light with his 100 men of the north and a dust on him from the neck and a sword across his back that had cut a Targaryen prince in half 100 years ago and was still cutting cleanly. Ned had said little. He had clasped Robert's wrist in both hands at the door of the chamber, and Robert had clasped his back, and that had been their meeting. They had not been able to say more in front of the others, and would not, for many years. He listened to Jon Arryn, who looked, in the afternoon light, 10 years older than he had a week ago, and 10 years younger than he had 3 days ago, and who was reading from a list. The list was long. Lord Tywin marches at the new moon, Jon Arryn said. 20,000 spears, by Varys's birds. The Marbrand, the Crakehall, the Leford, the Banefort. The Rain family, now reconstituted under a remote cousin since Tywin had the originals exterminated. The fleet sails from Lannisport on the same tide. Estimated time to the Golden Tooth, 8 days. From the Tooth to Riverrun, 14. From Riverrun to King's Landing, 20 more, if he comes the King's Road, less, if he comes the river. He will likely come the river. Will he come at all, said Renly's voice, in Renly's chair, which was empty and had been empty for 9 days because Renly was at Bitterbridge with the Tyrells. The voice was Stannis's, dry, mocking, perfectly pitched. Or will my dear brother find a reason to remain at Bitterbridge until we have settled it for him? Renly will sit, said Robert. Renly always sits. We will not depend on Renly. And the Tyrells. The Tyrells will sit also, until they see how the wind has blown. Mace will swear loyalty when the dust is up. He will swear it twice if asked. Lord Tully, said Ned. Lord Tully will rise, said Jon Arryn. He has had my letter. He owes me a daughter. He will bring his banners down the Trident. He will take the field at the crossroads or before. Robb is at Winterfell. The northern levies, the north will not march. The north does not need to march. The north needs to hold the north. The Boltons are, at this hour, receiving a charming letter from Lord Tywin offering them everything. We need to know that the Boltons stay home. We need Robb to keep them home. If your son does this, my Lord Stark, you have my thanks, if he does not, we have a second war. Ned's mouth was a line. Robb will keep them home. Then we have one war. Stannis looked at the map. And the Stormlands. The Stormlands are yours, brother, said Robert. Your hand at Storm's End is a good man. He will rise on your name. We have 10,000 spears in the Stormlands. With Renly at Bitterbridge. With Renly at Bitterbridge. Robert's mouth twisted. He will not, when this is done, hold the Stormlands again. We will give him a wife and a small castle and a place at court if he behaves. If he does not behave, we will give him the wall. I am tired of my brothers being clever, Stannis. As am I, said Stannis. There was a small silence at the table. Even Jon Arryn smiled. 20,000, said Ned, is more than we have. It is, said Jon Arryn. The Vale will rise. Jon Royce has my orders. 6,000 spears down the high road in 12 days. The Riverlands will rise, 10,000 under Edmure Tully, perhaps less if the phrase Lord of the Crossings as they will. The Stormlands, 10,000 under Stannis's banner. The North, holding home. The Crown's own, 2,500 regulars and 3,000 goldcloaks who are, as of this morning, swearing fresh oaths to the throne. We will, if all goes as it should, meet Lord Tywin at the Trident with 26,000 of our own. Where the Targaryens met us, said Robert, softly. The Wheel. Where the Targaryens met us, said Jon Arryn. Tywin, said Stannis, is not a Targaryen. Tywin will not charge on a single charging man. Tywin will take his time. Tywin will burn villages to draw us east. Tywin will offer 1,000 small bargains to 1,000 small lords, until our column has fewer men in it than it had at dawn. Tywin will, if he is permitted, make this a war of attrition that our treasury will not survive. Then we should not permit it. Stannis lifted his head. Brother. You know what I would say. Say it anyway. Single combat. You and Tywin. On a field, before the host. He will refuse, of course. He will refuse 3 times. But he will not refuse if the alternative is open battle in which his army has to outnumber ours by 1/3 or be lost. He needs to win quickly, before Bolton turns and Tyrell turns. He cannot afford a long war either. Press him. Make him fight where he does not want to fight. Make him offer the realm a king's combat or a king's battle. Either way we win. I will not fight Tywin Lannister single combat, said Robert. I do not fight men I despise. I lose interest. Then send a champion. Stannis. We will not win this with a champion. We will win this with a field. 30 miles south of the Ruby Ford, on the Trident, on a flat ground where their cavalry cannot use its horse and our archers can use their bow, and on a day where Tywin's army is hungry and ours is fed. We choose the day. We choose the place. We make him come to us. And if he does not come, he will come. He has never not come. Tywin's only weakness is that he believes Tywin will win. Make him think he can win at the Trident, and he will be there in 12 days. Stannis considered. He nodded once. He had agreed with his brother for the first time in 15 years. The world did not stop turning, but it did, for an instant, hesitate. There is one further thing, said Jon Arryn. There always is. The Iron Bank. Tywin's debts. The Crown's debts, and the Queen's debts, and Lord Tywin's debts, are all interlocked. Peter Baelish saw to that, in his time. The Iron Bank has not been paid for 2 years, and they have been very patient, but they have, this week, ceased to be patient, and they have ceased to be patient on the same week that the Queen was taken into custody. They have written to me. They wish to know, very politely, with whom they are dealing. And who are they dealing with, said Robert. They are dealing with you, your grace. With the Iron Throne. Not with Lord Tywin. I have written to them, in your name, that the Crown will assume 2/3 of the Western debt, in exchange for their assurance that no further coin will reach Casterly Rock. They will agree, because they prefer money in hand to gold in a mountain. They have agreed already, in a small letter that came this morning. Lord Tywin will, by the time he reaches the Trident, have his coffers shut against him from the only bank that mattered to him. You have been busy, old man. Yes, your grace. Good. Robert exhaled. He looked tired. He looked, also, more himself than he had looked in a year. Then we ride. Day after tomorrow. North along the King's Road. We will meet Tully at the inn at the crossroads. We will meet Yohn Royce on the high road. We will meet Stannis' Stormlords at the Trident. We will meet Tywin where Tywin chooses, but we will choose the ground. And we will, if the gods are kind and the gods are paying attention, have an end of this in 3 weeks. And the Queen, said Ned. Robert looked at him. The Queen rides with us, in a covered cart, with a guard of 6 men and a maester. I will not leave Cersei Lannister in this city while Tywin Lannister marches on it. She rides. So does the boy. Joffrey? Joffrey. Robert closed his eyes briefly. Aye. Joffrey too. He will see his grandfather across a field, if it comes to that, with my arm around his shoulders, and we will see what kind of man Tywin Lannister is when he must look at his grandson under the king's wing. That is cruel, said Stannis. I have been kind for 15 years, Stannis. I am tired of it. The council closed. The maps were rolled. The lords rose. Ned Stark and Jon Arryn lingered, the last to leave the chamber, and stood together by the great fire, 2 old men who had, between them, raised most of the men in this realm who were now riding to kill each other. Jon. Ned. This will be a hard road. It will, my friend. You are sure. I am sure of nothing, Ned. I am sure only that we cannot stand still. We will ride, and we will see, and we will do the next right thing, and we will hope the next right thing leads to one after that. And Robert. Jon Arryn smiled, very faintly. Robert is more himself today than he has been in 20 years. He will not last. He will, when this is done, slip back into the wine. He will die in a brothel or in a boar hunt or at his own table. But for the next 3 weeks he is the man you and I rode with at the Trident, and we will use him while we have him. And after. After is for Stannis. The realm will not love him. But the realm does not love most of the men who have to do the hard work at the end of the long roads. Ned looked into the fire. He thought of his daughters, who were at home, of his wife on the parapet at Winterfell, of Robb at 15, who would, before his father returned, learn to be a lord. He thought of Lyanna, whose name had not yet been spoken between them. It would not be spoken today. It would not be spoken tomorrow. Some names did not need to be spoken. Let us ride, then, he said, and let us hope the gods are paying attention. Yes, said Jon Arryn. Let us ride. Outside the window, far to the north, a column of dust was already beginning to rise from a road that nobody in this room could see, where 20,000 spears were on the move. In a guest tower at Casterly Rock, Tyrion Lannister was being told by his uncle, in that same hour, what his sister and his brother had done. He had not been at the Rock long, a fortnight, no more, having ridden up from a brothel at Lannisport on a bet he had lost to a Pentoshi merchant, and he had begun, in the way he had begun many times, to settle into a routine of avoiding his father by reading every book in the library that his father had not read. He was on his second cup of wine of the morning when Kevan Lannister knocked at the door, looked into the room, and shut the door again behind him before speaking. Tyrion. You should sit down. I am sitting down. More so. Kevan sat across from him. His uncle did not, as a rule, look afraid. He had been a soldier under Tywin since Tyrion was an infant. He had stood by the Rock through the Rain Rebellion and the Targaryen days. He looked, now, a little afraid. He reminded his nephew, briefly, of a man who has discovered that a building in which he has spent 40 years is built on no foundation he had not believed in. Tell me, said Tyrion, who had been the first in the family to guess, 12 years ago in a hot summer when Cersei had not been able to look at him for some reason, what was beneath his sister's skirts. He had not wished to be right. He had been right. Kevan told him. It came out in a flat military voice that did not change with the contents. Pycelle's letter. Joffrey's letter. The bird from Varys. The march of the west. The road being closed at the tooth. The summons of the banner men. The plan to march east at the new moon. And Jaime, said Tyrion, when his uncle had finished, has turned back to the city, by the Queen's letter. By now he is either in custody or dead. Tyrion drank, slowly, because his throat had gone dry. Father will lose, he said. Kevan's eyes lifted. He has 20,000 spears. Father will lose. He will lose because Jon Arryn lives, and Jon Arryn does not lose. He will lose because Stannis is heir and Stannis is the kind of man who wins this kind of war. He will lose because the Iron Bank will turn on him within a month, they always turn, and because the Tyrells will sit and the Boltons will sit and the Freys will sit, and 20,000 spears against the realm without coin and without allies is a procession, not an army. Tyrion. I am not telling you a thing you do not know, uncle. No. You came to ask me what to do. Yes. Tyrion smiled the small thin smile he saved for the worst of his moments. Tell me what you are inclined to do, uncle, and I will tell you whether you should. Kevan breathed out. I am inclined to ride east with my brother. He is my elder. He is my lord. He has not been wrong in 50 years. He is wrong now. Tyrion. He is wrong now, uncle. He has, in the last week, committed himself to a war he cannot win, and he has done it without asking either of us. Cersei has lost the kingdom. Jaime has lost his cloak. Father has now decided to lose the West. We cannot stop him. But we do not have to lose it with him. What are you asking of me? Tyrion was, briefly, the youngest dwarf in a tower of the Westerlands, and his uncle was the man who had carried him on his shoulder when his lord father would not. He felt, for an instant, the old shame of asking his uncle to disobey his father. He felt, for the next instant, that he was the only person in this castle who could ask it. I am asking you to take Casterly Rock. Take, garrison the rock. Stand the Lannisport men. Do not march. When father reaches the tooth, send a raven to King's Landing, in your own name, offering my house's surrender on terms. Surrender father. Surrender the West. Save the rock. The rock will stand. The Lannister name will stand. My nephew Tommen will, when this is done, sit a chair somewhere, even if it is only Casterly Rock. We will not be beheaded as a house. We will not be expunged as the rains were expunged. We will be diminished, but we will live. You are asking me to betray my brother. I am asking you to outlive your brother. They are not always the same thing. Today they are. Kevin stared at him for a long moment. He was, at heart, a soldier, and a soldier knew when a column was lost. He had known, since Pycelle's letter, that this column was lost. He had not allowed himself to say it. His nephew had said it for him, and the saying of it was, for both of them, the moment after which there was nothing to say but yes. I will think on it. Do not think too long, uncle. Father will be at the tooth in 8 days. He will have you locked up in your own chambers for treason on the 9th, if he has heard a whisper. He has not yet heard. He will. And you, Tyrion? I will go, said Tyrion, to where I can be of most use. Which is to say, I will go south, with an escort of yours, before father has set out. I will find Jon Arryn. I will offer him my service. He will accept it, because he is not a fool and I am not a fool, and we will, between us, save more of this family than father will think to spare. You will betray your father. I will save my father's name. I do not love him enough to share his grave. I have warned him for 10 years that he would do this to himself, and he has done it, and now I am going to make sure his line does not die in his ditch. That is not betrayal, uncle. That is what a son does, when his father stops being able to hear him. He drank the rest of his wine. He set down the cup. He stood, in the small dwarf stand of his stature, and his uncle stood with him, taller by 3 feet and somehow smaller in the moment. Bring me a horse, said Tyrion. And bring me your second best maester, who will write a letter for me in the kind of hand that no one in the south will recognize. I am going to King's Landing tonight. His uncle nodded. They embraced, briefly, the way men of the West embrace, with one hand at the elbow and one hand at the back, and Kevin went out, and Tyrion sat down again at the table, and looked at the wall, and was, for the first time in his life, not amused. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The realm divided. The royal host moved north along the King's Road in the 3rd week of spring, and the country it crossed was not the country it had been even a fortnight before. 100 leagues of road that had, in any other year, been busy with merchants' carts and the small traffic of a kingdom at peace had emptied. Word of war moved faster than any column. The villages along the road had their shutters closed by the time Robert and his vanguard came into view, the inns had their wineskins buried in the cellar before sundown, the mill at Hayford was being run, when the Stark riders came past, by a single old woman who had dismissed her sons to the woods. The kingdom had not been to war with itself in 17 years. The kingdom remembered, in its bones, what war was. Robert rode at the head of the column on a great destrier whose flanks had not been white with froth in too long. He wore the antler crown of the Storm Kings, which had been brought up from the vault at the back of the throne room 3 days ago and polished in the kitchens. He wore mail. He had, at his hip, a long sword, and across the saddle bow, in a sheath of plain leather, his warhammer. He had not carried the hammer in 5 years. It looked, on him, as if it had been waiting. He was sober. He had been sober for 9 days. His hands still shook in the morning, and the squires brought him water and small beer and, on the worst day, very weak watered wine, and Jon Arryn watched him as a doctor watches a patient who has not yet decided whether to live. Robert had been sleeping 4 hours at most. He had, for the first time in years, the look of a man who had something to do. Beside him rode Eddard Stark, on a northern horse that did not love the southern grass and showed it. Behind them in the column, in their rightful places, Stannis Baratheon and Jon Arryn, and behind them the lords of the Crownlands and the Vale, and behind them 5,000 men in good order and another 5 in less good order, and behind them, in a covered cart with curtains drawn and 4 guards walking each side of it, the Queen and the Prince. Cersei rode in silence. She had been allowed, by the king's mercy, the company of her son. Joffrey sat on the bench across from her in the cart with his arms folded across his chest and his face fixed in a sneer he did not himself believe in, and would not, for the rest of his life. He had not stopped sneering since the morning his grandfather's seal had been broken in a council chamber and the words inside it had been made to mean him. He sneered at the curtains and at the floorboards. He had stopped speaking to his mother on the 2nd day of the march. Cersei had stopped trying to make him speak on the 3rd. Tommen and Myrcella were not with the host. They were at the Eyrie, by Lord Arryn's order, under Lady Anya Waynwood's care, where they would, the hand had promised the Queen, be raised gently, in mountain air, away from any field on which their father might be killed. Cersei had not believed the promise. She had also not been given any choice but to believe it. She watched, through a gap in the curtain, the country pass. She thought of Jaime, who was alive, who was in a tower in the city behind her, who would, when this was over, ride for the wall in chains. She thought of her father, whose vanguard was, at this hour, at the inn at the crossroads, and whose own column was at the Trident's southern bank. She did not weep. She did not, in the company of Joffrey, allow her eyes even to fill. She had been a Lannister 40 years. She was still a Lannister. At the inn at the crossroads, on the morning of the 11th day, Lord Edmure Tully met the king's host with 12,000 spears and a fanfare of trumpets that the innkeeper had not heard since his father's day. Edmure was not yet 30, he had a Tully red beard he had been growing since he was 25, and was on his uncle the Blackfish's tightest leash. The Blackfish himself was at the inn, and clasped Lord Stark's wrist before he clasped the king's, and was forgiven for it on both sides. The Riverlands had come. The Vale came 2 days later, down the high road. 6,000 spears under Jon Royce, in bronze plate that had been older than 3 of the kings of Westeros. They were less a host than a council, every great lord of the Vale rode with them, because every great lord of the Vale had, in his time, been a guest at the Eyrie of Jon Arryn's father, and they were riding for the hand of the king and not for any Baratheon. They formed up beside the Riverlanders. They saluted the king. They sat at table with Robert in a great open pavilion, and laughed at his jokes, which were Robert jokes, and reminded an entire generation of lords what a king at his ease could look like when the cause was right. The Stormlands came on the heels of the Vale, marching up the King's Road from the south, 10,000 spears under the banner of the crowned stag and the new banner of the burning heart that had begun to fly at Storm's End beside it, a small thin pennant, no man could yet have read what it stood for, but it was there. Stannis Baratheon's banners formed up on the right of the king's host, and Stannis Baratheon rode out to meet his brother, with Davos at his shoulder, and inclined his head, and said, "Brother, we are here." And Robert had not embraced him. He had clasped his shoulder, briefly, and turned away to the maps. It was as much as Stannis would ever ask. By the time the king's host crossed the Ruby Ford and made camp on the south bank of the Trident, it numbered 28,000 spears. By the time the 8,000 banners of the King's Guard, the Goldcloaks, and the Crownlands lords had been added, it was 30,000 and more. The army of the realm had not been so large under one king's banner since the Trident itself. The river, that morning, ran low, the rubies were said by the small folk to be still in the silt where Rhaegar had bled out. Robert sat his horse on the south bank for a long time, looking, not speaking. Ned Stark sat his horse beside him. "It looks the same," said Robert, after a while. "It does, your grace." "It does not feel the same." "No, your grace." "You are an old man, Ned." "And you, your grace." "I." Robert smiled crookedly. "I. We will be older yet." Tywin Lannister's host crossed the Red Fork at the stone mill on the same morning the king's host made camp at the ford. He had come east at the new moon, as he had said. He had taken 12 days to reach the river. He had lost not a single man on the road, he had, in the towns he had passed, hung not a single small folk, he had marched a column 20,000 strong with the discipline of the Reach in summer. He had also lost, since leaving the Tooth, the use of the Iron Bank, which had, as Jon Arryn had foretold, closed its books to him on the 7th day of the march and reopened them, very quietly, in King's Landing. He had also lost the Fry crossings. Walder Fry had read the wind in the west and the wind in the east, and had decided that the wind in the east was stronger, and had refused passage of the twins to anyone not riding the king's banner. And he had, on the morning he crossed the stone mill, lost his brother. The Raven from Casterly Rock had been short and signed Kevin Lannister, Castellan of the Rock, in his own hand, in the formal style. To my brother, Lord of Casterly Rock and of the Westerlands. Brother. The rock cannot empty for this war. I have stood the Lannisport guard down. The fleet is on harbor watch. I will not march the west further from its mountain than I am charged to defend the mountain. I have written to the king and to his hand, in my own name, offering the rock's neutrality on terms of peace. I will hold the rock for House Lannister whatever the outcome of your campaign. I commend you to the gods, brother. Come home alive. Tywin Lannister had read this letter once, in the saddle, on the bank of the Red Fork. He had not torn it up. He had not cursed. He had folded it twice and placed it inside the breast of his armored coat. He had ridden on, until his column reached the next ford. He had given orders to make camp. That night, alone in his tent, with his map spread before him, Tywin Lannister did a thing he had not done in 50 years. He poured a cup of wine, and he sat at his table, and he drank it. Then he poured another cup, and he drank that too. The third cup he did not drink. He set it on the corner of the map of the Riverlands, on the spot where, by the morning, his army would have to choose between 3 roads. He looked at it for a long time, the cup of wine on the map, like a counter on a chessboard. In the morning he rose, sober, and gave the order to march east. He had not slept. He had taken counsel with no one. He had, as he always did, made his plan. The plan involved, at its center, the field Robert Baratheon had chosen, and a column of 800 horse who would, if everything went as Tywin intended, swing wide of the field at dawn and fall on the king's right wing where Stannis' Stormlords would be light. It was, by the standards of Tywin's career, a not particularly elegant plan. It was the plan of a man who knows he must win in one stroke or not at all. 2 nights before the battle, in the king's pavilion on the south bank of the Trident, a man was brought in by the watch and presented to Lord Arryn under guard. He was very small. He wore a road-stained doublet of fine cut. He had been riding for 3 days, by his own account, on a mule borrowed from a sept on the King's Road. He had been arrested at the picket of the Vale men because he had announced himself as Tyrion Lannister of Casterly Rock and had asked, in a voice that did not at all sound like a man trying to be smuggled, for Lord Arryn or Lord Stark. Jon Arryn looked at him over the rim of a cup of warmed water. "My lord," said Tyrion, bowing as well as he could in the cramped pavilion. "I bring you the surrender of Casterly Rock and a great many tedious cousins. I should like, if it is not too much to ask, a piece of bread." Jon Arryn's face did not, at first, change. He motioned for the bread. He motioned for the guards to step out. Ned Stark, in the corner of the pavilion, set down the report he was reading and lifted his head. "Lord Tyrion." "Tyrion will do, my lord. I have not been a lord in any meaningful sense since I was born, and after the next 2 days I expect to be lordly chiefly in the way of a man who has chosen the winning side. May I sit?" "Sit." He sat. He ate his bread with the deliberation of a man who had not been allowed to eat in a long while because he had been watching every meal for poison. He drank a thimble of wine, he made a face at it, he set it down. He spoke without preamble. "My uncle Kevin is the Castellan of Casterly Rock as of 9 days ago. He has stood the Lannisport guard down. He has shut the gates of the rock. He has posted ravens to you, which you will have received, offering the West's neutrality for the duration of this war and our submission to the Crown's terms in its aftermath. He will not, while my father lives, raise his banner for the king. He will not raise his banner for my father either. He will hold the rock for the family that the rest of us are so very busily destroying. I have come south because I would prefer to be the Lannister you talk to about the West when this is over, and not the Lannister you talk about. Jon Arryn had not stopped looking at him. He set down his cup. And your sister? My sister is your prisoner, and will remain so. And your brother? My brother is going to take the black, my lord, and we are all going to pretend that this is justice. I will write to him at the wall, occasionally. He will not write back. He has never been much of a hand at letters. And your father? My father, said Tyrion, is going to lose his battle, my lord. He has already lost his war. He will not surrender. He will charge the line. It is what he does when his calculations have gone wrong. He will, on the field, attempt one stroke that he believes the rest of us will not see. You will see it. You have a Vale Knight named Royce on your right wing, I am told. Move 200 archers up onto the rise above his right at dawn the day of the battle. Conceal them in the wood. My father's hidden cavalry will come around that flank at first light. He has done it twice in rain campaigns. He will do it once more here. It is, in fact, the only thing left to him. Jon Arryn studied the dwarf for a long moment. Ned Stark, behind him, had begun to write. You are betraying your father, Tyrion. I am preserving my house, my lord. Most of my house, at this hour, would prefer to be preserved than to be loyal to a man who has sold us in one season for the chance of recovering a bargain that was lost in another. My father is a great man. He is also a finished one. I would like, when this is done, to be the dwarf who saved Casterly Rock from the Targaryens of his line. I will settle for being the dwarf who saved Casterly Rock from his own father. And what do you ask of us, in turn? Tyrion smiled. I ask 3 small things, my lord. First, that my brother be sent to the wall and not to the headsman. I see by your face that this was already so. Good. Second, that my sister be sent to a quiet place where she may live a quiet life, and that quiet place not be a black cell. I see by your face that this was also already so. Better. Third, that my nephew Joffrey, when this is finished, not be put to the sword. I do not love the boy. I am asking for him because his mother loves him, and his mother will not survive the news of his death, and a Lannister of any age in the ground is a Lannister around whom a war can be built tomorrow by the next ambitious Marbrand. Send him to the wall. Send him to a September, send him to the free cities under a false name. I do not care which. But do not bury him. That, said Jon Arryn, is the king's choice. I know, my lord. I know also that the king listens to you. I am asking you to ask him. Jon Arryn was quiet a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded once. I will ask him. That is all I require. Sit a while longer, Tyrion. There is a battle in 2 days. I should like to know how your father intends to deploy. Tyrion grinned, broadly, the grin he had spent his entire life rehearsing for moments such as this. My lord, I have been waiting for a man to ask me that since I was 8 years old. He pulled his chair forward to the table. He took up the quill that Ned Stark had been writing with. He drew on the map in 3 quick strokes a column, a feint, and a fork, and Jon Arryn and Ned Stark leaned over his small dwarf shoulder and watched a battle being mapped, and outside the pavilion the watch changed and the Vale Knights at the picket walked their cold round, and the river ran low, and the rubies of Rhaegar lay in the silt. By dawn the king's plan was changed, and the Vale archers had been moved onto the rise above Lord Royce's right, and the dwarf was asleep in a corner of Jon Arryn's tent under a horsehair cloak, snoring with a small brave dignity, and the realm was waiting. Earlier on that same night, before the dwarf had been brought in, the king had held a court of judgment at the center of his camp. It was not a trial. Trials, by the law of the Seven Kingdoms, were the work of the king sitting in formal session in the Iron Throne or in the Great Hall at Storm's End, and required septons and notaries and a list of witnesses sworn before a September of the Stranger. A trial would come, when the realm's bones were knit again, and Cersei Lannister would stand at the bar of it and hear the charges read and answer them in such words as she chose to answer. That was for later. Tonight was a public unmaking. Tonight was the king on his knees in the dirt of a battlefield camp, before 3,000 men of the Stormlands and the Vale and the Riverlands, opening a wound so the wound could begin to close. A great open space had been cleared at the center of the camp. Torches at the corners. The king's chair, plain and unbacked, on a pallet. Robert sat on it with his hammer across his knees. The queen had been brought from the cart. She wore, at her own request, a plain riding gown, no jewels, hair plaited like a maiden's at her shoulder. Joffrey was beside her, in a doublet of crown stag black on which the stag had been picked out of the threading by a maester's careful knife the night before. The boy's neck was bare. Cersei did not look at him. The lord stood in a half-ring. Stannis, in his rigid black, on the left. Ned Stark in his northern grey on the right. Lord Tully and Lord Royce and the Lord of Storm's End and a dozen others. Jon Arryn at the king's right shoulder, with a sheaf of parchment under his arm, of which he would read aloud only as much as was needed. Robert rose. His voice carried. He had not always carried his voice, in council. He had not, in 5 years, needed to. It carried now. Lords of my host. Stand and hear me. The crown of the Seven Kingdoms is, by the law and the gods, descended from the body of the king to the body of the king's son. Where there is no son, to the king's brother, by the right of blood. Where the king's son is no son of the king's body, the crown does not pass into him. It passes around him, as a river passes a stone. I have been told, by the hand of the king, by a grand maester now in custody, by a queen's brother who has confessed and a queen who has confessed, that the children I have called my own are not my own. The boy here beside the queen, Joffrey of House Baratheon, has been my son in the law and in the eyes of the realm for 12 years. He is not my son in his blood. Tommen and Myrcella, who are not in this camp, are not my son and not my daughter. They are children, all three, of the queen's brother Jaime Lannister, and of the queen. This thing I have been told. This thing I have, in my own person, examined. This thing I have, in my own private grief, accepted. There is a book of bloodlines that the hand has consulted, there is a chain of witness, there is the confession of the queen herself before this council and before me. It is so. It is not a thing I would say, lords, if it were not so. He paused. He looked at the queen. The queen did not lift her eyes. Therefore I, Robert of the House Baratheon, the first of my name, King of the Undulls, the Roiner, and the first men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the realm, declare and proclaim, before you and before the gods of this and any other land, that the boy Joffrey Lannister, who has these 12 years borne the name and the courtesy of a Baratheon prince, is no Baratheon, and no prince. That he is not in the line of succession to the Iron Throne, and never has been. That he is to be styled, henceforth, by his blood name only, and to be answerable, henceforth, to the law of the realm in his own person and not in mine. That my brother Stannis of the House Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone, is, and has been since the day Joffrey Lannister drew his first breath, my heir presumptive and the heir to the Iron Throne after me. That his name and dignity is restored to him with all the powers and privileges of the heir, with the formal ceremony to be held at the September of Baelor when this campaign is done. That the Queen Cersei of the House Lannister has by her own admission committed treason against the king's person and against the realm. That she is to be held in close confinement until such time as the law shall judge her. That her father Lord Tywin Lannister and her brother Ser Jaime Lannister are co-conspirators and traitors to the same crown. That her brother is to be sent to the wall, his blood spared by my mercy, and that her father is to be answered, from this hour, with iron and not with words. He stopped. The silence was the silence of 3,000 men holding their breath. He turned, then, to Joffrey. He took 2 steps forward. He put a hand under the boy's chin, not roughly, and he tilted up the boy's face. He looked at it. The boy stared at him with hatred and with terror, and the king did not flinch from either. "Joffrey," said Robert, very quietly. "I have called you my son for 12 years. I have not been kind to you, and you have not been kind. We were not, you and I, well suited. Whether that was the blood or the man I cannot now tell. But you are not to be killed for your mother's sin, do you hear me? Not while I live. Not while I am king. You will be sent to my brother's keep at Dragonstone, where you will be raised by Lord Stannis as his ward, and where you will be taught a trade if you will learn one. You will not wear a crown. You will not, in this realm, claim the name Baratheon again. You will live." The boy's mouth worked. He could not speak. He had not been afraid of anything in his life and he was afraid now. Robert took his hand from the boy's chin, gently. He turned to Cersei. "You have heard me, my lady. I have heard you, your grace. Have you anything to say?" She lifted her eyes. They were dry. They would, perhaps, never be other than dry again. "Only this, your grace. Whatever you do to me, you have not, in this hour, killed my children. I will not forget that. See that you do not." He turned away from her. "Take her back to the cart. The boy too. We have a battle in 2 days. Lords of the realm," he raised his voice again, "you have heard me. Tomorrow you will draw up your banners. The day after, we go to take the field. We have not chosen this war. We will end it where we are met. Sleep tonight, lords. Eat well. Pray to whatever gods you keep. The realms will has slipped its axle and you and I are going to set it back." He was answered by a great low sound, not a cheer, that came up out of 3,000 men in their lines as if from one chest. It was the sound of an army that had been told, at last, what it was for. That night, in his small black tent at the edge of the camp, Stannis Baratheon sat alone with a cup of beer untouched on the camp table before him. He had, for 15 years, been the unbeloved brother. He had carried that name through his diet and his speech and his marriage and the color of his cloaks. He had, in the last hour, been named heir to the Iron Throne in the open before the army of the realm. It was not a thing he had asked for. It was the thing he had spent 15 years preparing himself to refuse to ask for, because asking would have been beneath him. He looked at the cup. The cup did not advise him. After a while, the flap of his tent lifted, and a woman came in. She was tall, in a dark red robe, and her hair was longer and redder than her robe, and her eyes had been picked out of an unfamiliar fire. She bowed, very low. He had not ordered her to be brought to him. She had come because she had come. "My lord. My king. Not yet a king. Soon a king. Lady Melisandre. The hand of the king has written to me, very politely, that you are to leave my service, with whatever escort you require, by the day after tomorrow. I have read your letters, my lord. And I will go where the Lord of Light directs me. He will direct you to leave my camp. He has not yet directed." Stannis looked at her for a long time. He did not, in the matter of the priestess, share his hand's certainty. He did not, in the matter of the priestess, share his own certainty. He had been promised, by her, that he was the prince that was promised, which he did not believe, that her God was the only God, which he did not know, that fire would tell him things, which he had let burn out untended on 3 nights of his life. He had also been promised, by her, that he would be king. He was not yet king. He was heir. He was, in this hour, less than 3 days from a battle. "You will leave my camp before the battle is joined," he said. "You will go to Storm's End. You will pray there for me, if you must pray, and for the realm. If we win, I will send for you. If we lose, you will be safer at Storm's End than you are here. My lord, I will not have, on the field where my brother dies if my brother dies, a foreign priestess with a torch in her hand. The men of the Stormlands will not fight under that banner. The hand of the king will not have it. I will not have it. He looked at her steadily. I have been a small man, Lady Melisandre. I have been told for 15 years that I am dour and cold and unbeloved. It may be that I am about to be a great king, and it may be that I am about to be a footnote. I will not, in either event, be a king who got his throne by the hand of a god he does not understand. The Lord of Light, if he wants me, will have me on my own terms. If he does not, I will do without him. Go to Storm's End. Take your books. Take your fire. I will write to you when this is done. She stood, very still, a long moment. Her face did not change. Then she inclined her head, deeply, and turned, and went out of the tent. He did not see her again that night, or for many nights to come. Davos, in the morning, would tell him, with a small careful smile he did not try to hide, that the lady had taken horse before dawn. Stannis did not smile back. But he ate his bread that day with a clean appetite, for the first time in a long time. 2 days later, at the first grey of dawn, the host of the king crossed the last small wood between camp and field, and saw, on the long flat ground south of the Ruby Ford, the host of the Westerlands waiting, in 3 blocks of foot and a wing of horse, with the lion banners standing very still in the windless air, and one banner, a single banner, not yet down at the staff, of a man on a high horse, in red plate, alone in the center of the field. Tywin Lannister had ridden out, the night before, and chosen his ground. Robert had ridden out, the same night, and chosen his. The grounds had not been the same ground. Tywin had moved during the night to take Robert's. Robert had let him. The Vale archers were on the rise above the right wing. The hidden Lannister cavalry had been spotted at midnight by a Stark scout and were even now waiting in the wood for a charge they did not know was already known. The trap of Tyrion's drawing was set. The king, at the head of his vanguard, lifted his warhammer above his head, and the first horns of the trident sounded. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7, The New Order. The Battle of the Ruby Ford, as it came, after, to be called by maesters, and the Battle of Tywin's Folly as it was called by the small folk who had to bury the dead, lasted 3 hours. It began with horns, and ended, 3 hours later, with a man on a black horse coming alone across the bloodied ground under a flag of parley, and the Lion of Lannister no longer flying anywhere on the field. In between, this is what happened. At the first horn the Lannister vanguard advanced in good order, 3 blocks of foot in checker, with the Marbrand cavalry on the right and a thin screen of crossbow on the left. Their advance was, as was Tywin's manner, slow. A column of arrow fire from the king's archers shortened them, they reformed and advanced. They were within 50 paces of the king's first line when, from the wood behind the king's right wing, a horn sounded that no man on the field had been expecting, except for one. 800 Lannister horse, who had been hidden in that wood since the 2nd hour after midnight, came thundering out at the king's right flank with the speed of cavalry that knows it has been kept too long in the cold. They had been told, by Tywin's standing order, that this charge would split the king's host like an axe. It did not split them. The Vale archers on the rise above Lord Royce's right had been waiting for them since dawn. The Vale archers loosed before the charge had reached its 3rd stride. The Lannister cavalry, who were the cream of the West and who did not run, ran instead, in formation, into a wall of feathered shafts, and they kept running for 200 paces, into the lances of the Vale knights who had been waiting for them at the bottom of the rise, and the 800 became 400 and the 400 became 75, and the 75 turned, and rode, and were not pursued. The king's right held. Lord Royce, after, was given his own banner of a black horse over a white field, by the king's hand, in remembrance of the day. In the center of the field, with his hidden cavalry broken, Tywin Lannister did the thing he had not, in the long careful career of his command, been forced to do for 50 years. He charged. He charged at the head of his household guard, 300 mailed riders, in the colors of his house, with the lion across his cloak and the lion across his shield and the great long sword of Casterly Rock held above his head. He charged because he had no other move. Tyrion, in the king's pavilion 2 miles to the rear, had said this would be the move. It was the only move. It was the move of a man who has lost his calculations and who will, by the strength of his own arm and his own banner, retake them. The charge did not reach the king's line. The king's line was 30,000 men 3 lines deep, with archers behind, with 3 rises on the field broken at intervals by stakes, with 2 streams running across the field that Tywin had not, in his haste, had time to bridge. The Lannister horse caught at the streams, broke ranks, came on in a thin column, were peppered by the king's bowmen, were ridden down by the king's own household horse, and were halted by Robert Baratheon himself, who had spurred forward with his banner and his hammer at the moment the Lannister charge had begun to disorder. He met Tywin at the second stream. There were 100 riders around them, Lannister and Royal, hacking. They came out of the press at each other by accident, by pull of horses, by the way the sea throws 2 stones together at the high tide. Tywin had Bright Roar, the great Lannister sword, which had been believed lost since Tommen II went east in Dragon's Wake. Robert had his hammer, which had broken Rhaegar at this same river's water. They knew each other. They had not, in 15 years, looked one another in the face. They looked now. Tywin drew Bright Roar across at Robert's neck. Robert took the blow on the haft of his hammer. He felt the bone of his arm go through the haft and the haft go through his arm, and would, that night, not be able to lift the hammer again, but he did lift the hammer that one time more. He brought it up. He brought it down. He had grown fat in 15 years, but he had not, when the moment came, been weak. The rage of Cersei Lannister and the rage of 15 years had gone into the swing. The hammer struck Tywin Lannister at the shoulder, glancing, downward and inward. It did not kill him. It did break his collarbone, his shoulder blade, 4 ribs. It carried him from his horse. He fell to the ground in his red plate with the great sword tumbling from his hand, and his guard rode in to drag him out, and Robert, in the saddle, with his arm hanging useless, could only watch as the Lion of Lannister was lifted by his own men and carried back through the press. That was the end of the center. The Lannister foot, who had not yet engaged, began to walk backwards, in good order. Word of their lord's fall travelled the line in the wing beats of birds. By the time it reached the rear, where Ser Kevan had not, after all, been able to send a man, the line was already drawing off. Robert lifted his hammer once with his good arm and brought it down once on the head of an unhorsed knight who had, perhaps unwisely, refused to surrender, and then lowered the hammer, and dropped it, and let it lie. A man on a black horse came across the bloodied ground an hour later, alone, under a flag of parley. He was not Tywin. He was Ser Kevan Lannister, who had ridden hard up from Casterly Rock and arrived 2 days ago at the rear of his brother's host, in time to be too late for the charge and in time to be on hand for the rout. He came to the king with his head bare. He laid the great sword of Casterly Rock down on the ground in front of the king's stirrup. He said, in a clear voice that did not waver, "Your Grace, I bring you the surrender of the West." Robert Baratheon, with his arm hanging and his face streaked with blood and the trembling of a body that had done its hour's work, looked down at the small bald man and the great sword on the bloody grass and said, "Get up, Ser. Mount your horse. Ride with me back to my camp. You are not, this day, on your knees in this field." Tywin Lannister did not die of his wounds, but he was 12 days in his pallet at Riverrun before he could speak again, and he did not, in the rest of his life, ride a horse. He was carried by litter back to Casterly Rock on the order of the king, with an escort of 50 Vale men who saw him to his door. He was kept, at his own keep, in a wing of his own choosing, with his books and his maps and his maesters, and he was a prisoner only in name. The king had, on Jon Arryn's counsel, decided that a Tywin Lannister on a chair at Casterly Rock was easier to manage than a Tywin Lannister in a black cell at King's Landing, and that a Tywin Lannister in pain was easier to manage than a Tywin Lannister at large. Tywin lived for 3 more years. He wrote, in those 3 years, a long account of the Rain Rebellion, and a longer account of his own campaigns. He did not write, at any point, of the queenship of his daughter, of the kingslaying of his son, or of the trident. The maester who attended his last days reported, in a letter that was burnt by Jon Arryn the morning he received it, that the great lord had asked, on his last morning, for a cup of wine, and had drunk it, and had spoken, very quietly, the name of his late wife. That had been all. He was succeeded, at Casterly Rock, by his son Tyrion. Tyrion Lannister, by the king's grant, signed and sealed by the hand of Robert Baratheon at the camp at the Ruby Ford on the morning after the battle, was confirmed Lord of Casterly Rock, Warden of the West, and head of House Lannister. The grant was made in the presence of the surviving lords of the West, who were, all of them, men whom Tyrion had spent his life either out drinking or out arguing. None of them objected. Some of them, perhaps, were relieved. They had not, in their hearts, wanted the wars of Tywin. They were given, now, the wars of Tyrion, which would be fewer, and stranger, and rather better remembered. He took the cup, when it was offered. He drank it with a small bow, and did not show his hand shaking. He had, at 30, become the head of a house that he had, at 29, expected to be excluded from. The kingdom did not love him for it. The kingdom had, however, recently learned to live with not loving its great lords. He was given a year of peace, by the new hand of the king, in which to mend the West to the realm. He used the year well. Cersei Lannister, in the last courtroom of her life, was tried at the September of Baelor on the 3rd day of the new moon after the battle, before a council of 7 judges, 2 of whom were maesters and 5 of whom were lords of the realm. She did not contest the charges. She entered, by Jon Arryn's design and the king's permission, a plea of submission. The judgment of the court was that she had committed treason against the person of the king and against the realm, and that the law of the kings of the Undulls required, in such a case, the head of the offender. The judgment was that the king, having taken counsel with his hand and with the high septon, exercised the royal mercy. The queen was stripped of her style and dignity. She was confined to the Silent Sisters at the convent of Maris on the Sea of Dorne, on a coast where the wind came in from the empty water and not from any of the 7 kingdoms. She was permitted to take with her a single woman of her household. She was permitted no letters out, but she might receive 1 letter a year from each of her remaining children. She lived, in those Silent Sisters, 11 years. She did not speak in those years, the Silent Sisters did not speak, the wind off the empty water did not speak. The maester who attended her at her death, who had been a small boy in her father's keep before she was queen, wrote in his letter to the new lord of Casterly Rock that she had, on her last day, taken the sun on a stone bench in the convent garden, and had smiled, very faintly, at a pomegranate fallen from a wall, and had eaten 3 of its seeds. That was all he had to write. She had been, in all the rest of her last years, exactly what the order required of her, which was to say, silent. Jaime Lannister took the Black at Castle Black 2 months after the battle. He went with 17 men of his old guard who chose, of their own will, to ride north with him. He did not speak, in his year of training, of the South. He was assigned the title of Captain of the First Watch within his 2nd year, on the recommendation of Lord Commander Mormont, and was sent ranging beyond the wall in the 3rd spring of his service. He rode out under his own banner, which he was permitted, by the customs of the watch, to carry, a black field with a single golden hand, in remembrance, perhaps, of the king's hand that had spared him, or perhaps of the lord's hand that had, in his prime, struck the throne of a mad king and ended a dynasty. Of his life thereafter, the chronicles of the wall record only that he served well, that he kept his sword sharp, and that he laughed, at the end, more often than he had been observed to laugh in the south. Joffrey, never again Baratheon, never confirmed Lannister, was sent to Dragonstone in the autumn of his 13th year, in the company of 3 Stormlords appointed his governors. Stannis Baratheon was not a soft man, and would not, in the boy's first year of confinement, let him alone with any animal smaller than a horse, having been informed by Ned Stark of the boy's particular tastes. The boy was given lessons in horsemanship, in numbers, in a little common, in the laws of the realm, and in the small careful work of running a keep. He proved, in the first year, sullen, in the second year, quiet, in the third, briefly cooperative, in the fourth, strange. He died at 15 of a fever after a fall from his pony on the steep stone path above Dragonstone Harbor. He was buried in the small graveyard of the household chapel at Dragonstone, in the rear corner, where the wind off the sea would, in winter, scour the small lichen-grey stone clean. His mother was permitted, by the High Septon's special dispensation, one letter from the Lord of Dragonstone telling her of his death. She did not, in any way that could be observed, react. Tommen and Myrcella, raised by Lady Anya at the Eyrie, learned to climb the high road and to like mutton stew and to fly small hawks at the gulls of the Trident. They did not, after their 5th year of fostering, ask after their mother. They were, by the time they came of age, soft-spoken and slow to laughter and very much each other's twin, and were kept always in each other's sight. Tommen, by the king's wish and the Lord of Dragonstone's lobbying, was at 22 given the keep of the late Lord of the Crag in the Westerlands, which had no heirs, on condition that he take that house's name. He did, and he was Tommen Westerling, and he did not raise any banner for any cause. Myrcella, at 19, was wed to one of the small lords of the Vale and was, by all accounts, content. They did not, after they came of age, see their mother. Their mother was, after they came of age, by the rule of the Silent Sisters, beyond the reach of letters. The realm, who had been unable to look at them once, learned, with a willing forgetfulness, to forget them. Renly Baratheon returned to court in the spring after the battle, with a smile that was not quite his old smile, and was given, by his brother the king, the title of Lord of Storm's End, since Storm's End now passed by the law of the realm to the heir to the Iron Throne and Stannis had no longer any need of it. Renly, for his lordship of Storm's End, was required to swear fealty before the realm, and to take to wife such a lady as the king's hand might choose for him, and to live, for the first 3 years of his lordship, at the king's court, where his every motion would be observed by Lord Arryn's small birds. He swore. He took to wife Lady Olyvar of House Cairn, a quiet older widow who, by Jon Arryn's calculation, would not be a vehicle for any further plot. He lived at court 3 years. Loras Tyrell was, by Lord Arryn's suggestion and Renly's relief, sent to the Iron Islands as a permanent envoy of the crown to the Greyjoys, where he was useful, and where he was not in Renly's chamber. Renly, after his 3 years of probation, was permitted to return to Storm's End, and lived there in greater modesty than he had been raised to, and outlived his brother the king by only 6 months. Robert Baratheon lived 7 years more. His arm did mend, but not entirely. He could not, after the Trident, swing a hammer. He gave up boar hunts in his 2nd year of recovery. He did not, in any year of his life thereafter, stop drinking, but he drank, by Jon Arryn's count, less than he had drunk in any of his years on the throne. He sat in council, he heard cases, he laughed, sometimes, at the wrong moment, and made pronouncements that startled the realm. He was, by the end, the best king the realm had had since his grandfather's grandfather, by which most maesters meant only that he had been better in the second half of his reign than in the first. He fathered 3 more children, 2 by a baker's daughter at Stony September, 1 by a Riverlands lady-in-waiting, all 3 as black-haired as Robert's elder brother Steffan Baratheon's portrait above the hearth at Storm's End. He acknowledged them as his bastards, named them all Storm, and set up a small house at the Stormlands border for them. The eldest of them, Brella Storm, would, in her 16th year, be made by her uncle Stannis the king's ward at the Red Keep, and would, in the king's will, be left 1,000 dragons. He died in the summer of his 42nd year, of a winter fever he had taken on the King's Road after a long ride. He died in his bed at the Red Keep, with Jon Arryn at his side. He spoke, at the last, the name of Lioness Stark, as he had spoken it on every quiet night of his life. Jon Arryn closed the king's eyes. Stannis came down from Dragonstone within the day. The realm did not, for the first time in 200 years, contest the succession. Stannis Baratheon was crowned at the September of Baelor in the autumn of that year. He was crowned with the antler crown of the Storm Kings, by the High Septon, with the host of the realm in attendance and his wife Cella stiff at his side and his daughter Shireen, much loved and 10 years old, holding the train of his cloak. He was a king the realm did not love, and a king the realm trusted. He cleaned the Iron Throne's account books. He paid, in the first year of his reign, the last of the Lannister debt to the Iron Bank, and shut the Iron Bank out of the realm's business for 50 years. He made law that any maester suspected of poisoning his lord be flayed alive. He held the crown, very carefully, in his small hard hands, for 14 years, and did not let it be jostled. He died of his bowels, having outlived his hand by 10 months, and was succeeded by his daughter, who became the first reigning queen of the 7 kingdoms by the law of her father, and reigned long, and gently, and not without occasional wisdom. The realm was, in her time, peaceful in a way it had not been in 100 years, and the sigil of the burning heart was added, as a quartering, to the crowned stag, and is on most banners of the Stormlands to this day. Eddard Stark rode home to Winterfell in the second autumn after the battle, with his sword ice across his back and a small chest of salt from the Iron Bank's first-year payment as his only loot of the war. He was met at the gate of his keep by his lady wife and his 5 children and a small grey direwolf that had grown to the size of a pony in his absence. He embraced them all. He did not, in any year of the rest of his life, leave the north again. He raised his children, in their order, to be the lords and ladies they were to become, and he forgave his bastard son's choice to remain at the wall, and he kept his own counsel, and he died, in the deep winter of his 67th year, in his own bed at Winterfell, with his wife at his side and his eldest son holding his hand. His last words, by the report of his maester, were not Lioness' name, although he had loved her well. They were the name of Robert, his old friend, who had died 10 years before him, and who had, in the strange way of friendships made in childhood, never quite stopped being the boy at the Eyrie even at the last. Jon Arryn stayed in the south. He was hand to Robert until Robert died, he was hand to Stannis until his own death, 12 months later, in his 69th year, of a slow weakening of the heart that no maester could mend. He did not return to the Eyrie in his last years. He was buried in the September of Baelor, in the old crypt of the Hands, which had not been opened for 60 years before him. His tomb has, on its plain stone, 2 words carved by his own request, "He lived." In a small house in a small town on the southern edge of Pentos, in the autumn of the year of the Trident, a man with a thin clever face and grey at his temples had finished his fish supper alone, and sat at his window, and looked out at a square in which, by lantern light, 2 boys were practicing tumbles for a coin. He had been calling himself Bran Stiltskin. He was no longer being called that. He had been recognized, that morning, by a fishmonger who was in fact a small bird. He had paid the fishmonger 50 silver for his silence, knowing perfectly well it would not buy more than 3 days. He had, this evening, written a letter to a lord of Casterly Rock whom he had once played Cyvasse against in a tower in the city he was no longer in. He had asked for help. He had, by the act of asking, made himself the servant of the dwarf for whatever years remained to him, and had known it as he asked. He had, in the days to come, become useful to Tyrion Lannister in small matters of trade, and had been allowed to keep his small house in Pentos, and to keep his name, and to keep his head, and had, every year of his quiet life, written a letter to a woman at Riverrun that the woman did not open, and that her brother burnt unread, and that the man went on writing anyway. He lived 10 years longer. He died in his sleep in his small house in Pentos, of an unspecific old age. The small bird at his door reported it to Casterly Rock by raven. The dwarf did not respond. The square outside his window did not, on the morning of his death, change in any way. And in a small mud house on the far edge of the world, on the wide grass east of the Bone Mountains, where the rumor of a thing called Westeros had not been heard for 3 months at least, a girl with silver hair and 3 eggs of stone in a chest at the foot of her bed turned her face to the lifting sun, and breathed, and considered the day before her, and did not yet know that the realm of her birth had, in the spring just past, set its bones, that a king named Robert had paid an old debt, that a queen named Cersei had been broken to silence, that a prince named Joffrey had been sent to climb a steep stone path, that a man named Stannis was the heir of the Iron Throne, that Lord Tywin had ridden out and not, in any meaningful way, ridden back. She did not yet know any of it. She did not need to. The eggs in their chest were warm to the touch. She put her hand on them. Out the window, far to the south, the wind off the grass moved, and a horse whinnied, and her brother the new king of Pentos called her name. She turned her head, and answered him. The realm of Westeros, that had been so close to falling, had, through one old man's careful hand, not fallen. It would, in time, have other troubles. It would have winters and dragons and enemies it had not yet thought to fear. But it would meet them, when they came, with its own bones in their right places, and its kings on its thrones, and its laws on its tongues, and that, in the long account of any kingdom, is more than may always be asked. Jon Arryn, looking down from the window of the Tower of the Hand on the night the news of Robert's death was carried by raven to him, set down his cup of cool water, and looked out across the city he had governed for many years, and said, to himself only, very softly, he lived. He meant Robert. He meant, also, himself. He meant, perhaps, the realm. And so, for a little while, did everything else.